Chapter 553. Asliers shook his head and woke up from his slumber. After adapting to Iradia's law of infinite worlds, he was gradually recovering his power as an abyssal monarch. A being of this level would have an instinctive reaction to the hostility of the outside world, which was why he was awakened and received the malice of other powerful beings. Someone is trying to harm me, Asliers subconsciously thought. He reconstructed his body underground and appeared in the underground palace of the Black Rock Mountains. This was the place where the infernal monarch displayed his power and power. A large group of Balrogs and abyssal fiends had already gathered. They sensed the call of Asliers the moment he woke up and prostrated themselves respectfully. "Great Master, we welcome your awakening. This world is waiting for your arrival." A Balrog called out flatteringly. Asliers looked around and checked the surging power in his body. The results were not satisfactory, and he was a step closer to his slumber. He was more used to Iradia's attributes. "How long have I been asleep?" 300 abyssal days. The Balrog accurately reported the time. "What happened during this time?" "After you fell into a deep sleep, a civil war broke out in the Black Rock Mountain immediately. Merrigan and Sardos led the demons to fight endlessly. Pula wanted to embezzle your property and was killed. In the Civil War, we lost 2,000 demon warriors, but nearly 10,000 newborns were born. 1/3 of them can join your army. Enough." Asliers suddenly raised his upper body. "You fools. These things have been repeated countless times in the abyss. This is not what I want to know. I want to know about Iradia. The army of the higher realm is about to arrive. I need to know this world like the back of my hand. This... Master, as you know, our territory is currently under strict lockdown by the Blackwing Empire. Countless mutated dragons are flapping their wings to monitor our every move, and you've ordered us not to wage war against those ugly dragons." The Balrog said while bowing, and then added softly, "Of course, there were demons who disobeyed orders and attacked those dragons, but they were all killed. In other words, the great lord of the higher realm, the infernal monarch, has not obtained any information after entering this plane for so long." Asliers widened his eyes. "Strictly speaking, yes, Master." Asliers stood up as if he was thinking. His huge body shook the palace that was hundreds of meters tall and wide. Scorching lava gushed out of the dark red cracks on the ground. Unforgivable. The demons were as silent as cicadas in winter. They bowed and retreated in fear, afraid that they would be affected by the powerful force of the Lord's wrath. Unforgivable. Asliers roared furiously. "Damn Caesar, how dare you treat me like this? Foolish, naive, and childish. I've had enough. Now, I will show you what a grave mistake it is to offend an upper realm monarch. You will regret your actions and beg for mercy at my feet." The demons were all excited. "Are we finally going to fight those ugly dragons?" "Great Master, as long as you give the order, the abyssal army will surge out of the Black Rock Mountain and sweep away all obstacles that dare to stand in your way." Asliers turned around angrily. Just as he was about to give the order, he thought about the disparity in power between the Black Rock Mountain and the Northern Empire. The word war was like a lethal poison in his throat. He could not spit it out no matter how hard he tried. Meanwhile, the demons below were still waiting in anticipation. Just as the situation was extremely awkward, Asliers found a way out. He sensed that something from the outside world had intruded into the Black Rock Mountain. So he quickly changed the topic and ordered the demons to capture the intruder first. Ugh! Odin looked up at the scene in front of him. The Black Rock Mountain was like a sharp and tall black spire. The top pierced the sky as if it was the residence of the devil. However, Odin knew that this was just the appearance. The real Black Rock Mountain was under his feet. It was deep and dark underground. Countless demons were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws as they slaughtered each other. "Yes, Father said so." Odin sniffed. In her vision, there was a violent and evil aura of negative energy everywhere. There was also a thick and pungent smell of blood. Surprisingly, Odin did not dislike the smell. On the contrary, she was looking forward to it. The evil dragon blood in Odin's body from Caesar would not only strengthen her body and strength, but also affect her personality and preferences. How do I get in? This was the thought in Odin's mind. Yes, she wanted to enter the Black Rock Mountain. As she grew older, Dark Dragon found that she had awakened a new ability. In order to quickly master the new ability and give her parents a surprise, Odin spent a lot of time practicing it in private. She even forgot about the games and entertainment that she usually focused on. However, the results were minimal. She was always at a loss. Dark Dragon found that her new ability could only be used when she was in a dangerous situation. Therefore, after thinking hard, the Black Rock Mountain, which was often mentioned and labeled as evil, became her target. After all, it was the only place in the entire north that was not controlled by the Empire. Odin was also helpless and did not have a good idea. In addition, she was also looking forward to the legendary Balrog King Asliers who could fight against her father. She wanted to see what a real Abyssal Lord looked like. Therefore, after finishing her studies for the week, Odin ran out of the court with the excuse of visiting Garcia in the Elven Forest. She shook off the few radiation dragons who had been tailing her along the way and turned northwest. Finally, she set foot on the burning Black Rock Mountain. The smell of charcoal and acid crept into Odin's nostrils. Soaring flames shrouded the surroundings. A ferocious demon crawled out from the ground, flapping its bat wings as it approached her. Scales and horns, humanoid. It has claws and a tail, no hair, and uses weapons. It looks like a hybrid between a draconid and a bat. Odin memorized this series of characteristics in her mind. This was her first impression of demons. Right now, standing before her was an abyssal pure fiend. As expected, humans are more shameless than demons. To actually throw an abandoned little girl here. The Hezru grumbled. Its scaly hands held a double-edged spear, the surface of the weapon flowing with magma. Did the Lord say to capture her? Why not just eat her? Such a fresh human. The demon muttered to itself as it moved forward, its chaos attribute gradually showing. Demons shouldn't be that tasty. Odin's little face showed a conflicted expression, her brows knitting together. Finally, as if she had made up her mind, she waved her hand at the air. A quicksand formed from dark gray radiance appeared, devouring the Hezru's body along with its roar. Father said it's best not to eat humanoid creatures. Forget it then. Seeing this, the fire elemental demons wandering around scattered like birds and beasts. They had to report to the other demons that the invaders were not as weak as they looked. They had encountered a powerful enemy. Chapter 554. Other than Asliers' direct will, there was no unified military command center in the Black Rock Mountain. These demons gathered in batches under the command of the great demons, and when they found a target, they would swarm together. This kind of military system often led to civil wars, and it also gave the demons countless opportunities in their thousands of years of war. The first one to receive the news was the Baelor Sardos. As the top magical creature in the abyss, any Baelor could obtain a ruling position among the demons, second only to the Lord of the Abyss. So when the Lord of the Infernal Prison fell into a deep sleep, Sardos immediately took over the power. He was the direct initiator of the civil war in the Black Rock Mountain. Until Asliers woke up, Sardos was still in command of more than half of the demons in the Black Rock Mountain. As a Baelor who had lived for hundreds of years, Sardos was no longer as reckless as the young warriors. He used the Baelor's talent of true detection and perception to perfection. When he received the report from the little elemental demon, Sardos immediately began to spy. His perception told him that the little elf who broke into the Black Rock Mountain was not a female forest sprite, but a giant dragon. A giant dragon disguised as a forest sprite. What kind of weird fetish was that? Sardos hesitated. His omniscient spell was hindered when he detected the true form and strength of the dragon, which meant that his magic power was not enough to see through the opponent's disguise. Either the target's power level was higher than his, or the target's bloodline was special and powerful. It was an ancestor or a legendary dragon. Sardos hesitated whether he should report to the Lord, but in the end, his chaotic nature won over his thinking. He impatiently chose to use violence. After all, he was just sending these stupid minions to fight. If he could not win, he still had the Lord to back him up. Sardos waved the chain that was wrapped in flames and let out a deep howl that was unique to the demon race. The demons surrounding him immediately became excited and rushed to the surface of the black rock mountain one after another. When Odin came to her senses, she was already surrounded. Although the demons in front of her were just minions to the Lord of the Abyss, with her size, the demon-hunting spiders, Hezru, Balru, and abyssal demons in front of her were powerful and terrifying. The Hui dragon used her innate talent and shook the space. Visible ripples on the mirror surface spread out with her as the center. The large group of demons fell into a quagmire of psionic energy midway. The stronger demons were bleeding because of the force field wall, while the weaker ones were broken by the dislocation of space and died halfway. Ark, Odin flew over and stomped a Hezru into pieces as if it were a bug. Her eyes gradually brightened. Destruction, blood, and slaughter were awakening the violent genes hidden in her blood. The little dragon stretched her limbs and transformed into her true form of the fairy dragon. Energy poured out. Odin in this form had a beauty that did not belong to a dragon, but it was extremely deadly. Her fighting style was completely different from the true dragons in the material plane. Odin rarely came into close contact with demons. The colorful energy circled around her and attacked according to Odin's will. What was more surprising was that these energies were not one-time use and would disappear after being used. After being scattered, they would return to Odin in the form of particles and fuse into the radiance around her. The radiance swept across the battlefield in a beautiful way that the great demon Sardos could not describe with words. In a few minutes, hundreds of demons were destroyed. Energy and blood shrouded Odin, turning her into a terrifying killing machine. Seeing the demons in front of them being devoured, the demons at the back were not willing to die for nothing. They began to hesitate. Even if the demon warlord kept cutting down the deserters, it was useless. A bunch of trash. Sardos realized that he had to do it himself. He wrapped the flaming chain around his claws and emerged from the ground. Don't! The Baylor roared and rushed into the air. He came into close contact with the terrifying radiance. The chain held by his claws shone with strange and twisted inscriptions. In an instant, Odin felt the danger. More than half of the energy attached to her body was devoured. She quickly turned around and dodged the chain that was swept by the Baylor. She then jumped back and distanced herself from the opponent. Magic erosion. Oomph. Sardos snorted twice. Stupid intruder. I have seen that you don't know how to fight at all. Without this energy and aura, your fighting skills are even worse than a demon that has just been born in the abyss. Your claws and wings are as weak as paper. Fragile dragon, I will teach you how to fight. Just as the Baylor had said, at present, Odin was the opposite of her father. Her knowledge and experience of close combat was basically zero. Energy and aura were the powerful weapons that the little dragon relied on. This was understandable. In the heart of the Blackwing Empire, who would let Odin Tangerine, who was born noble and loved by thousands of people, play close combat with other races all day long? This was something that only her family, followers, and guards should do. However, Odin, who had entered the Blackrock Mountain alone, had to face this situation. But Sardos was not a good teacher. He was a deadly killer. Hundreds of years of life and the harsh environment of the Abyss had given him more than just experience in battles. The Baylor's strength and skills were not inferior to the legendary warriors in the material plane. The flame on the chain drew a beautiful trajectory. Odin could only try her best to retreat and dodge. She could not find the opportunity to attack at all. She was completely suppressed. Even the weakest spellcaster among the demons can tear a few pieces of flesh from the opponent with their claws. A sarcastic smile appeared on Sardos' face, as if he could judge the superiority and inferiority of the demon race and the giant dragon race. He was ready to end this battle. Other than that, bullying a little being that was countless times smaller than himself would not give him a sense of superiority. The huge force of the chain broke the ground. Every step of the Balers made the ground shake. Sardos seized the opportunity in the storm-like attack. He suddenly stretched out his claws and blocked the escape route of the strange little dragon below. From top to bottom, he slammed Odin to the ground. Pressing down hard, Sardos, with bloodthirsty eyes, bared his fangs. Although he noticed that the dragon below was still alive, he still said arrogantly, "I hope I am not flattened. Otherwise, I will not be able to explain to the Lord." Then, the Baler indifferently moved its palm away. Whoosh! Odin jumped out like a stream of light and appeared in front of Sardos. Her expression became serious and serious, no longer looking stupid and harmless. She stared at the demon in front of her with hostile eyes and then coughed up blood. "If you don't run, you will be killed." Sardos' mocking expression froze before it could even form. Before he could finish his words, the dragon in front of him let out a low roar. It was no longer the original crisp and pleasant sound, but more like the roar of the five-colored evil dragons. Odin's body burst out with an unprecedented bright light. The strong energy storm made Sardos have to raise his hands to protect his face. His claws drew a deep trench on the ground. An astonishingly huge dragon body appeared on the surface of the Black Rock Mountain. A pair of ferocious golden eyes looked down at the Baler from above. With the appearance of the dragon in front of them, all the demons fell into stagnation. What kind of dragon was this? Its whole body was covered with purple scales and pale bone armor. Each scale was as sharp as a blade. Its big and thick teeth flowed with rich energy. This guy was more than 30 meters long. Its exaggerated claws could not even touch the ground. In front of it, even the fiercest demon of the abyss became cute and pleasing to the eye. The third form, the most evil dragon, Lord of Twilight, Odin Tangerine. Chapter 555. Arg. Odin let out a low murmur. The overlapping sound was like the low growls of a group of monsters. The wild wolf hidden deep in her blood was completely awakened at this time. Like the countless ancestral dragons that had soared in the sky for hundreds of thousands of years, the golden vertical eyes burst out a fierce light. The ferocious dragon raised her huge claws and slammed them on the scorching ground. The purple magic patterns all over her body flashed with a twisted light. After transforming into the third form, Odin's body had undergone a drastic change. Her complex biological structure was rapidly transforming energy into physical strength. This transformation method not only increased the mass and density of her muscles, but also made her scales as hard as diamond armor. In her low murmur, the elements of the entire Black Rock Mountain were completely subdued. They obeyed the summons and came to Odin's side. Then, they were gathered and tempered into a more advanced void substance. Odin stomped her foot, and thick and terrifying spikes appeared one after another on the surface of the Black Rock Mountain. The crazy spikes that were completely composed of the purple crystal void substance instantly covered the spreading magma on the ground like a cage, trapping the Baler in front of her. These spikes instantly pierced through the body of the Baler Sardos that was wrapped in armor. Corrosive green blood spurted out from the wound on the demon's body. Then, the great demon's painful howl came from the Black Rock Mountain. Sardos knew that he was in big trouble. This dragon was only in her innocent and harmless form before, but she was able to fight back and forth with him. Now that she had revealed her true, ferocious form, her strength had increased by more than one level. If he continued to fight, he would be in big trouble. However, the surroundings were sealed by the spikes, and it was impossible for him to escape and call for the Infernal Sovereign. The Baler felt a great threat in front of this strange dragon species. This feeling reminded him of the Black Emperor that came with Asliers to the material plane. Sardos roared and reached out to break the spikes between his ribs. He turned around and fled. Demons were arrogant creatures like the Red Dragon, but they would never be as reckless as the Red Dragon, pretending to be a hero when their strength was not enough. However, Odin would not let him succeed. The Hui dragon originally came to the Blackrock Mountain to test the power of the third form, and this Baylor had injured Odin. This was the first time she had bled since the day she was born. Ouch! 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 The young Odin screamed in her heart. The pain made her angry. She clenched her claws and wanted to give the Baylor a heavy punch. What is this thing? Asliers held his chin and looked at the illusory projection in front of him. In the image, Sardos was being beaten up miserably. Opposite him, the giant dragon of an unknown race was surrounded by electric purple energy. Its cold eyes looked down at the Baylor, and it used its claws to break the Baylor's bones several times. Looking carefully at the corner of the projection, one could see the corpses of the demons in the Blackrock Mountain. The few that could still stay on the surface could not attack at all to pose a threat to the giant dragon. They were eroded by the endless void energy and lost their ability to move. The infernal sovereign gently rubbed its claws. This strange dragon seemed to have a clear purpose. It was coming for the Blackrock Mountain. However, Asliers could not remember who else in the material plane had dealt with him except for Caesar. Moreover, to enter the Blackrock Mountain, one must pass through the Blackwing Empire. Could it be that this strange dragon was let in by Caesar to mess with him? Well, that's all. Asliers stopped thinking. He did not expect that he could analyze for so long. The task of using his brain for this year should be completed. Then it left the underground palace. Odin, who was beating the Baylor, suddenly stopped. She felt threatened. An unprecedented crisis loomed over her head. The little dragon immediately realized that she had gotten into big trouble. The Baylor king, who was in a deep sleep in the Empire's intelligence, had awakened. She no longer dared to hold back. She killed the Baylor with one tail and then used her spatial ability to prepare to escape. But it was too late. The space was sealed. Odin's heart was beating wildly. She raised her head and looked up at the great thing that appeared in front of her. The 50-meter-tall infernal sovereign appeared on the surface of the Blackrock Mountain. Its whole body was condensed from rolling magma and fire elements. It had a vague body and 2 arms. In the blazing flames, it also held a golden war hammer and a black whip. Its head was a huge pale skull. Its hair was burning flames. In the flames, a horn-like crown extended, symbolizing its identity as the King of the Abyss. The Lord of the 606th floor of the Abyss, the terrifying demon that mastered the power of fire elements, the infernal sovereign Asliers. Although she knew that this guy was not her father's opponent, when the king of the Baylor stood up from the hottest magma in the Earth's core, Odin still felt a burst of palpitations and oppression. This feeling was something that she had never felt when facing the ancient Lich Aglarin. Even if she was caught by the other party, Odin was still calm, because at that time, her father was by her side and she was fearless. But now it was different. She had to face a terrifying creature that could run rampant in the astral plane alone. The moment Asliers appeared, the surface temperature of the Blackrock Mountain rose by more than 30 degrees. The void energy surrounding Odin could not even get close to it. The surrounding thorns made of void energy also showed signs of melting. The Lord of the Infernal Prison was close to a god. It was an absolute domain that mortals could not offend. The king of the Baylor brought flames, not ice. But a sudden silence still froze the area. Odin, who was uneasy, opened her mouth, thinking about whether to ask her father for help. Unexpectedly, Aslier spoke first. The tall king of the Baylor glanced at the fairy dragon and tilted his head. Strange. I can actually smell the scent of that bastard Caesar. As expected, he deliberately sent you to disturb me, right? That damn bastard. Odin stole a glance at Asliers. Seeing that the other party had no intention of attacking, she quickly turned in her harmless fairy form and explained in a low voice. I snuck out. Father doesn't know about this. You're his descendant? Aslier's interest was piqued. He looked down at Odin and then let out a thunderous laugh. I didn't expect that bastard to be interested in procreation. Can he find a mate of the same level in the material plane? If the mate's level of life isn't high, they can only give birth to a freak like you. I'm not a freak. Odin was angry. She puffed up her cheeks and glared at the king of the Baelor. If her father knew that this fellow was speaking ill of her, she would definitely give it a good beating. It's very painful for a freak like you to live in the material plane, Aslier said to himself. For you, death is mercy. If I squash you to death, Caesar would be very happy when he finds out. He wouldn't have to do it himself. Odin was horrified and immediately tried to communicate with the black scales that her father had given her. Don't be nervous, little fellow. I'm just joking with you. Aslier smiled again, as if amused by his own words and Odin's reaction. You really aren't a freak. You don't show any signs of mental deformity or anything like that. As for your strange appearance, it's exactly the same as your father's. With that, the king of the Baelor muttered softly, The power in your body also comes from Caesar. Why didn't that fellow show it to me? Hey, what's with that posture of not wanting me to hear it? Odin, who had just calmed down, could not help but complain. You're standing right next to me, and your voice sounds like thunder. I can hear it even if it's soft. If Caesar is your father, then who is your mother? Aslier's rubbed the skeleton's chin with his claws, scrutinizing Odin's appearance from head to toe. Your other form should retain more of the characteristics of a mother, right? Looks like you're not a giant. I'm not telling you. Damn little fellow, who do you think you're facing? Aslier's yelled, his demonic nature erupting. I am the great lord of the upper realm, the unparalleled king of flames. Everything in the material plane is beneath my feet. Everyone must kneel before me, but you can't beat my father. That's only temporary. Once I've completely adapted to Iradia's rules and regained control of all abyssal power, that bastard Caesar can only cry and beg for mercy in front of me. But you're now locked up in the Black Rock Mountain and can only sleep underground every day. Odin said truthfully, You're infuriating me. Can you say something else? Hurry up and tell me who your mother is. Chapter 556. It had been a long time since Phelan Ramp focused on one thing. Just like her nickname, the Chaos Red Queen, everything Phelan did was chaotic and unpredictable. Everything around her changed according to her whimsical whims. For example, she changed the beautiful treehouse into a dark charcoal or turned her copper dragon into a silly doll. Those who hated her said that her brain was fried by overflowing magic power, so they also called her Crazy Phelan, or more simply, Crazy Woman. If he used the alignment identification spell on Phelan Ramft, she would definitely be a chaotic good. But even though Phelan was also a member of Chaos, she was still different from the neutral and evil Chaos members. At the very least, Phelan wasn't a lunatic. Her seemingly meaningless actions of Chaos were actually for the sake of fulfilling her moral code of punishing the evil and promoting the good, although her methods were somewhat unacceptable. Now, Phelan was at the edge of the Trade Federation. Looking down at the bleak scene on the ground, she could not help but frown. Ul's Meat Grinder, that was the current name of this place. Once upon a time, this was the city of spellcasters in the Trade Federation. Many years ago, Phelan lived here for a period of time as a lecturer in the Ul's Academy. Everything beautiful in the past was still vivid in her mind. Now, when Phelan's copper dragon flew over the ruins of Perno, she felt her intestines twitching. Her palms were sweating as she held the reins. Who was it that ruined everything? The twisted traces of death covered the once beautiful land. These slug-like, winding roads were trampled by thousands of cavalrymen, monsters, and ferocious creatures. No one knew if this bloody land of death could be restored. It went all the way through Perno, which no longer lived up to its name, divided the temples of the gods, and then went into the eternal moon forest and mystic grace, tearing apart this city with countless magical stories and songs. Even in the air, Phelan could still see the traces left by the invaders. Flames and thunder were still roaring, and there were also undead wandering and killing on the battlefield. She felt her eyes were dry. Witnessing the destruction of beautiful things made this existence above legendary feel pain. As a descendant of the goddess of magic, she had the power to restore this land to its original state. But who could save the lives that had been lost? Phelan had the bronze dragon turn to the west, wanting to see the symbol of Ul's, the towering mage tower. As they approached their destination, Phelan's lips began to contort. The sudden and sharp pain ignited her anger. This tower, which was once worshipped by countless central spellcasters, had now become a worm bed for all sorts of monsters and beasts to live in. The copper dragon sniffed the air and grunted angrily. Phelan didn't have to lean over to listen to its whispers because she had already seen the source of its dissatisfaction, the dragon beast. Those were clearly not ordinary draconic beasts. Their bodies were covered with various disgusting bone shells and spikes. They roared ferociously, foolishly, and aimlessly wreaking havoc in their surroundings. Phelan knew where these things came from, the radiation dragons of the Blackwing Empire. It was an aberration created by an evil dragon in the north using some sort of magic. They were destroying the Trade Federation. Phelan Ranft let out a series of silent screams. Ever since she returned from the astral plane, all the anger that had been burning in her chest, but she had nowhere to vent it, poured all of it onto these mutated radiation dragons. She raised her staff, and the bronze dragon swooped down, casting one spell after another. The first spell detonated the radiation dragon's head, and before the monsters could understand what was happening, the second and third starbursts followed, igniting the remaining targets. The fourth radiation dragon sensed the danger and roared. It flapped its wings and wanted to fight in the air, but it died quickly as well. What followed was an area of effect, falling stars. Without waiting for the copper dragon to land, Phelan had already jumped down and began to attack the monsters hiding under the tower. The flashing giant blade cut open the body of the shadow manticore, completely annihilating them. Following that, the 4 gray centaurs were also sent to hell. 2 of them had their necks and chests cut off by the wind blades. When the 2 gray centaurs fell to the ground with blood gushing out, the other 2 were also burned to ashes by the fireball spell. The copper dragon flapped its wings and landed. It opened its mouth and spat out a cone-shaped petrifying breath. It used its turquoise eyes to search for enemies, whether they were living or undead. These damned northern scum actually blasphemed the dead and took the initiative to awaken the dead, spreading chaos and fear. Time passed by slowly. The roars and howls of the monsters rang in Phelan's ears again and again. When the surroundings became quiet and there were no longer any living creatures, it was already close to midnight. Her expression became serious. Advanced spell, time backtrack. Phelan wanted to know why Ul's was destroyed. After the spell took effect, a light flashed in her eyes and a certain existence appeared, but there was no follow-up. She focused with a serious face, wanting to see what was controlling all this, but the image suddenly boiled. The image was like the air above magma, distorted, blurred, and ferocious. In the broken image, a pair of dark golden eyes faintly appeared, slowly turning. Phelan quickly ended it. The opponent's power was much stronger than hers. If she did not stop, the existence that was being spied on would be able to trace back to her through the traces left behind by the spell. It should be the Blackwing Empire. Although there were only traces in the image, that pair of eyes, Phelan was sure that it was the Black Emperor. She had seen in the image sent to her by the goddess of magic and had a deep impression. After taking a few deep breaths, Phelan used time backtrack again. With the Black Emperor's identity, it was unlikely that he would personally come to the Trade Federation to fight. Otherwise, the gods might descend with their projections. The commander of the Blackwing Empire was someone else. Phelan decided to find him and get rid of him, doing her best to protect this land. This time, the image construction was much smoother. Phelan quickly saw the scene of Ul's being destroyed. A huge red dragon roared and trampled on the ground, its flame dragon breath sweeping across the battlefield. Behind it, an overwhelming army charged. Phelan murmured, "Damn it, Andrea." She recognized this guy, Nellie Andrea. This stupid and arrogant red dragon had wanted to rob her caravan, but she chased him for half of Iradia. In the end, he knelt in front of her and promised that he would never do anything bad again. Only then did Phelan decide to let him go. She did not expect that he would now become the Black Emperor's pawn. As a red dragon, He gave up all his pride and dignity to serve the black dragon. I should have skinned this guy back then. Phelan thought hatefully. Of course, it was not too late now. Chapter 557. Orsay is finished. The Lord of the Red Dragon, Nelly scratched his smooth chin with his claw. With the support of a large number of life transformations, the draconic body had returned to its peak state. The endless energy returned to the Red Dragon's brain for him to squander. After this incident, Nelly realized that as long as he did not seek death and stayed under the protection of the Black Emperor, he might be able to obtain the power that he had always dreamed of. Nelly could not help but look forward to it. He then threw Tiamat's request and ban to the back of his mind. He no longer paid attention to the situation in Orsay. The rise and fall of human cities had nothing to do with true dragons. The Lord of the Red Dragon turned around. On the ground behind him, there were many magic stones the size of an adult. Nelly extended his claw and knocked on the transparent crystal in front of him. The strange material made a crisp sound, and the runes on it flowed gently. These were magic stones from the north. There were more than 400 of them in total, and they were shipped to the Trade Federation in 10 batches. When the time came, they would construct 4 epic teleportation circles that could cover an entire city and transport the Black Wings troops to the central region. It seemed that the North was ready to turn this local conflict into a full-scale war. This is a trap. Wal Darim stood on a high ground in the full moon forest, looking at the city of Orsay in the distance. From this direction, the tall and majestic city walls of Orsay had been torn apart. Through the exaggerated cracks, he could vaguely see the strange beasts in the chaotic city. There were violent and stupid draconic beasts, greedy and cruel pseudo-dragons, and even more powerful descendants of the Black King. The cities the humans had lived in for thousands of years were slowly falling into the claws of the monster empire in the north. Although there were soldiers, spellcasters, and adventurers returning from the full moon forest every minute and every second, bringing back the trophies that they had hunted, the support that they provided was utterly inadequate. It could only delay the fall of other cities. Mata, Wau and Darim, who had barely survived the attack of the Darkblade, was still injured. His body was still bandaged, but he still chose to stay at the front line of the war. While observing the situation in the city of Orsay through the magic eye, he shouted the name of another commander. Half a minute later, a tall chocobo appeared beside one. The young commander jumped down and saluted when, Governor Volan, I'm preparing to gather troops to attack Orsay. This is the 3rd time Leader Tashim has urged us. If we don't take action, we might be regarded as traitors. Mata pulled on the chocobo's reins and looked at the weak one beside him. Although this governor was as silent as usual, in this period of time, Wei An's excellent observation, decisiveness, and charisma had already won the respect of the entire army. Without my order, no one is allowed to act without my permission. Vone stared at the black smoke rising in the direction of the city of Orsay and took a deep breath. I don't think the enemy will give up Orsay so easily. The timing of the retreat of Arsala's army is too deliberate. This is obviously a trap. I don't think we have the ability to take back the fallen city of Orsay with just our limited strength. I understand. Mata's fingers twitched at his waist. He looked around and lowered his voice. But sir, the crime of disobeying orders. I heard that the other governors have a grudge with you. They might take the opportunity to impeach the leader. Don't be silly, Mata. Look around you. One could not control his emotions at this moment. His voice rose a few octaves. Now we are facing the crisis of our country's destruction. At this time, who has the time to care about so-called political positions and power disputes? Trust your fellow countrymen. We are frontline commanders. The problems at the rear are not for you and me to worry about. At this moment, a black dragon pounced silently from the cliff below. Caught off guard, the 2 guards were smashed into pieces by the dragon. The smell of blood exploded in an instant. The dragon bared its fangs and brandished its claws, wanting to pounce on the other guards, but was immediately knocked to the ground by a fireball. However, the attack did not stop there. Behind the draconic beast, There were a dozen tall draconians waving their sharp weapons as they climbed up the cliff. There was also a group of yelling kobolds. All of this caused chaos to break out in the quiet and secretive observation camp. Mata's chocobo tried its best to break free from the reins and escape, when grabbed the heavy sword beside him. Although his old injuries had not healed, these weak dragon scouts were no trouble to him. The commander of the legion was not afraid. He jumped into the battle. His slender body twisted and turned among the dragons, and in the blink of an eye, 2 heads were chopped off. The guards and spellcasters quickly joined the sudden battle. With their quick response, the dragons and kobolds that invaded the camp were wiped out in less than 3 minutes. When everything was over, one was about to put down his sword and rub his sore shoulders. Suddenly, his face became serious. Draconic aura. One looked up and saw a real dragon hovering above their heads. Everyone was on guard. A guard near the brazier immediately grabbed a torch and was about to call for reinforcements, but one stopped him. One, who had better eyesight and calmer, saw that it was a red copper dragon. The followers of Bahamut would never become the Black King's minions, and the Federation and the Metal Dragons had a good relationship over the years. The red copper dragon flapped its wings and landed, causing a gust of wind. One, is that you, old man? Or am I mistaken? A woman's surprised voice came from the red copper dragon. Who are you? One was a little confused. He remembered that he did not have any metal dragon friends. It's really you? Surprise turned into joy. Phelan Ramft jumped down from the red copper dragon's back. Phelan, what? Anne's expression changed. How can it be? Didn't you leave Iradia? Mominos smelled the scent of battle. Immediately brought me here. Phelan took 2 steps forward. I was looking for the rebels around to fight against the Blackwing Empire and was preparing to collect some information. I didn't expect to meet an acquaintance. To be honest, I didn't expect that we would meet again. One showed a slightly embarrassed smile and looked at the strange beasts lying around. At least not in such an occasion. There aren't many occasions in the central region that are not like this. Phelan released an environmental purification. The situation is serious. One nodded with a serious expression. Since the rebellion of the city of Vagars, many things have happened here. That's why I'm here. Phelan interrupted him. Long story short, I've used magic to find the initiator of the fall of Ulse, the red dragon Neliandria. I'm going to kill it and use it to severely injure the Blackwing King and end the war of the Trade Federation. Praise the gods. The gods are indeed on our side. Sooner or later, the gods will throw the black dragon Tangerine and the monsters under its command into hell. The addition of the descendant of the goddess of magic gave one a lot of confidence. He closed his eyes and prayed devoutly. Then he smiled at Phelan and said, "What a coincidence. Your target is just ahead." Chapter 558. The fearless Vanguard Scout had already reported the situation, but she still wanted to see it for herself. So Governor Von Darim followed her through the birch forest and up a sandstone slope. "It's too close," Von warned and stopped. Phelan comforted the copper dragon Momolos and looked at the castle of Orsay across the field. The jumping elements and magic were her eyes, allowing her vision to expand infinitely without obstruction. When she was young, Phelan had learned how to accurately estimate the number of people. After a moment of observation, she said, "Only 5,000? I think so too." Wall nodded solemnly. "However, we have to take into account that the enemy is a clan army, shadow manticore, centaurs, gnolls, draconic beasts, false dragons, and radiation dragons. There might even be immortals hiding underground. I'm afraid their combat power is much stronger than we imagined." Most of the buildings in the city of Orsay had collapsed. The Red Dragon Lord, Neville, had flattened the ruins and built new, suitable for the clan to live in. He had changed the center of the city into the dragon's nest. The streets on both sides were drilled into the ground. The gnolls and gnolls lived under the majestic city walls, and the Mage Tower became the outpost of the Shadow Manticore. "It does look different from the beast clans we usually see, but it doesn't matter," Phelan said proudly. "With my participation, It will be easy for you to defeat and drive away these bastards. But we also need to bleed. Wallen was not so optimistic. He had experienced the Battle of Turbulent Creek Town, and it was a painful memory that he did not want to talk about. Countless human blood had seeped into the river, and the overwhelming number of enemies had rushed in from all directions and defeated them. He continued, "As you said, maybe we can win this battle and take back the city of Orsay. But the price we pay will also make us unable to face the expeditionary force of Alsala." "There are always risks," Phelan said. "What do you think?" "Use magic," Vaughn said. "There is no need to fight at all. We have the daughter of the goddess of magic standing beside us. She can destroy everything with magic alone. Throw down a mana bomb," Phelan. "With how sensitive these strange beasts are to magic, they won't be able to sense anything before a calamity befalls them." "Magic bomb?" Phelan glanced at her dragon subconsciously. "That will destroy the city of Orsay." "Destroy?" Wynn smiled bitterly. "Look at Olson in your eyes. It has been destroyed. The cleansing now is for the future reconstruction." "I agree." The copper dragon Momolos said, "Be it red or black, the Pinochet dragons are all evil scum. They will lead their evil kin to destroy all good things. They have no moral code to speak of. The best way to deal with them is to send them to hell." Emperor Enrither also said that we should not only show our strength to the north, but also show our cruelty. One continued, "The more we kill, the more terrified these scum become, and the less they dare to cross the northern border." "All right," Phelan nodded. In fact, destroying the city of Orsay was her ideal plan. The reason why she hesitated was because she wanted to see what the red copper dragon and Governor Volan thought. Now, everyone had reached an agreement. The incarnation of magic, the main god who controls the balance of the astral plane, the seven eternal stars, the mysterious lady, the mother of magic, Mistra. At night, Phelan avoided the snoring copper dragon outside the door and quietly came to a secluded place. After casting a magic barrier, she began to pray, "I implore you to listen to the call in your blood. Your daughter, your most devout believer, Phelan Raft, awaits your arrival with reverence. I implore you to guide me." Phelan, who had the blood of magic flowing in her veins, was greatly favored by the goddess. She had become a legend not long after she was born, and now she was climbing to the level of a demigod. Unlike ordinary believers and chosen, Phelan could communicate with the goddess of magic at any time and place. After the prayer, a large amount of magic energy gushed out of Phelan's body, turning into a cleansing and purifying fire. Mistra's projection slowly took shape in the fire. It was a beautiful human girl with smooth skin and flowing black hair. She looked even younger than Phelan, and her voice did not sound old at all. "The middle of the night is not an environment you like. What's wrong, my beloved daughter?" "Praise be to you, Great Mother." Phelan avoided the topic of midnight. That was the domain of another lover of Mistra, the king of the dead, Kalember. Both her father and herself were hated by that man. After a half-kneeling salute, she said, "Eladia is suffering. This land is being trampled by the evil dragon Tangerine and his servants. Now, I have joined the ranks of those who resist the tyrant and do my best to maintain the good and justice of this land. However, this evil dragon's power is far beyond what I can handle. The balance between good and evil in Iradia has been tipped upside down, and chaos has devoured order. This world is falling into the abyss," Phelan said sincerely. Phelan sincerely said, "That is why I have no choice but to pray to you. I beg you, and the good gods to lend a hand and punish this insufferably arrogant black dragon. Bring this world's chaos and order, justice and evil back on the right track, Tangerine." Mistra twirled her hair around her finger, pondering for a moment before understanding. "Are you talking about the mutated dragon of this world?" "Yes." Phelan nodded. "The people of this world call it the Black Emperor, the King of Dragons, or the King of Black Wings, but I don't think it's a dragon anymore. It's an evil creature. Its full name should be Caesar Orderonzo Tangerine," Mistress said casually. "My beloved daughter, you're still very weak. What you need to do now is to meditate and improve yourself, not play around in the astral plane and then fight against that dragon when you return to Ladia. Mistra's expression turned serious. My beloved daughter, you're still very weak. What you need to do now is to meditate and improve yourself, not play around in the astral plane and then go against that dragon after returning to Ladia. I was planning to further improve myself after returning to Ladia, but now that this material plane is in danger, the dragon's ambition has swelled to the point of no return. Phelan's tone gradually became agitated. It wants to rule the world, then I'll let it rule. What? Phelan asked subconsciously. She couldn't believe her mother's words, wondering if she had heard wrong. I said, then let it rule. That is, if it can do it. Mistress solemnly repeated her words. Seeing Phelan's incredulous expression, she couldn't help but explain, my beloved child, you have to understand that this is a world about to be invaded by the abyss. We alone can't stop the demons in this material plane. We need a voice from the locals, a powerful and efficient force. Then all the more reason to punish this evil dragon. As long as we kill it, the monster paradise in the north will fall apart. Then we'll let the unsetting empire clean up the mess and unite all of Iradia to resist the invasion of the abyss. Phelan argued, from what I know, the daybreak army of the unsetting sun is still fighting in the dimensional cracks. They're the true protectors of humanity. In your eyes, the unsetting sun is protecting humanity, but isn't the Blackwing Empire protecting the clans as well? There's no difference between the humans and the clans. They're all children of the Creator. Mistress smiled. Besides, my innocent child, this world isn't just black and white. The unsetting sun isn't as beautiful as you think it is, and the Blackwing Empire isn't as evil as you think. Survival of the fittest is the law of nature. This is also the final decision of the gods after discussing the situation in Iradia. This isn't fair. Phelan was unwilling to accept this. Caesar Tangerine is a mutated dragon. Every mutated dragon is blessed by the heavens and is the greatest disaster in the astral plane. But Enriel is also the son of Pyro. The purest blood of the sun flows in his body. No matter what, Phelan couldn't get the answer she wanted from the goddess of magic. In the end, she could only bow her head in defeat and wait for Mistra's projection to disappear. Her hands unconsciously clenched into fists. I can't accept the current evil in order to fight against future evil. Chapter 559. I'm doubtful, Lord Neville. Blackshirt stared at the small cards on the ground and said, Are you really familiar with the subtleties of this game? Are you questioning me? Human. The red dragon exhaled a breath filled with the smell of sulfur, and his big eyes widened even more. Although they just taught me how to play this game last week, the smart Neville only needs a few seconds to master its essence. Well, hurry up and play your cards. No one can play with me in this damn place except for you. So this is the reason why you let me stay. Sort of, Neville said vaguely. Just as he was about to steal 2 cards from the deck, he heard the unfamiliar sound of a teleportation spell. The spellcaster appeared in the Lord's Hall. The red dragon did not recognize him, but this teleportation portal was not commonly used and led directly to the Blackwing Palace. So Neville still turned around and hid the cards behind him. He curled his tail and looked at the person with a cautious attitude. Greetings, the powerful red dragon lord. Your Excellency Neville Andrea. The spellcaster bowed. I'm Ice's serving the Bone King Rain. Rain? Neville remembered this name. It was the half-lich who was so abnormal that he was obsessed with the skeletal dragon. The spellcasters who provided him with life transfer were his subordinates. The red dragon shook his head. The way dragons greeted was straight to the point. What are you doing here? Isis lowered his head and said, The Empire is very grateful for the efforts you have made in the central battlefield, but the recent stagnation of the Trade Federation's conquest has made the Empire's higher-ups puzzled. So the Bone King specially sent me to ask if you need us to provide more assistance for this operation. Are you sent by them to condemn me? Do you think my progress is too slow? This was the message the red dragon interpreted from the other party's words. He snorted heavily and released his dragon's aura. Who do you think you are? I'm directly loyal to Caesar. Even Caesar doesn't think I'm wrong. What qualifications do you have to criticize me? Azus maintained his bowing posture, but his tone was neither servile nor overbearing. We are all loyal to his majesty and serve the empire. As he spoke, he raised his head and stared at the enormous red dragon in the eyes. Also, allow me to remind you that his majesty has been traveling to Iradia recently and has entrusted the affairs of the Imperium to the leadership of the court. The Bone King has the right to supervise the battlefield of the Trade Federation. Your Excellency Ryan, I don't know why you are hiding in the city of Orsay that has been conquered and destroyed, wasting your precious time. Nalai took a deep breath. His huge body trembled slightly. It took him a lot of effort to restrain his impulse to get angry. If it was in the past, he would definitely roar towards the sky and spit out a mouthful of dragon breath to kill this reckless human before him. However, now that he was in the Blackwing Empire system, he could no longer be as arrogant and unbridled as before. Please tell Ryan that I will attack the other main cities of the Trade Federation as soon as possible. Nalai gritted his teeth and said, if possible, please ask him to send all the spellcasters under his command to the Trade Federation. This will speed up my progress in conquering this place. I am very, very grateful for his reminder and help. Azus nodded. After a blue magic vortex, only the red dragon, Nalai, and Black Shirt, who was standing silently in the corner, were left in the hall. On the side of the fire, a large piece of horned beef was skewered on a spear and roasted. The oil dripped down with a sizzling sound, emitting a mouth-watering aroma. I'm not playing anymore. Nalai angrily put away the pile of cards, grabbed the roasted meat, and stuffed it into his mouth. He said to Black Shirt, let my servants in. Great lord. After a while, a few Drakens stepped into the lord's hall. Your warriors are waiting for your orders. Their blood is boiling, and they are eager to fight. If you don't let them fight, the warriors will be restless. You don't understand. A lord not only needs great power, but also needs to know some strategy. Nalai said, I'm tired of you constantly asking me to fight. Now, even the court has begun to question my wisdom. We don't dare to question your wisdom, the Drakens said. We are all soldiers, and we also understand the necessity of tactics. If possible, please convey your strategic wisdom to us. Well, since the court keeps urging, Nalai said proudly, the reason why we stayed in the city of Orsay is to let the humans feel that their mystic grace is threatened. On the other hand, I've already asked the Airsala Expeditionary Force to leave here and sneak attack the core hinterland of the Trade Federation, Pudasius. Time seemed to have become extraordinarily long. The atmosphere was dull and silent. Only the sizzling sound of the meat dripping into the fire could be heard. You want the Airsala Expeditionary Force to sneak attack Pudasius. After a while, a Draken said bitterly, but we didn't hide it. The humans already know that they have left. That's not important, Nalai roared. Even if they fail, they will make the opponent transfer all their troops to Pudasius. Now it's time for us to attack Mystic Grace. Then, the roar was suddenly interrupted by a sudden noise. Nalai felt a sharp pain in his head. The ground trembled, and the dome of the Lord's Hall suddenly shattered. Then, a blue-purple ocean flooded Nalai's vision. A destructive spell bomb. The blue-purple lightning tore the dark sky apart. The sawtooth light flowed and changed in the air. As soon as it disappeared, it reappeared in another place. Nalai only had time to curl up to protect himself before he saw the energy storm sweeping over everything. In this terrible storm, the city of Orsay was being destroyed. Rumbling thunder and crackling electricity could be heard, as if the world was being torn apart and then reassembled again. The creatures in the range of the explosion were disappearing. In addition to the terrible energy storm, the ocean-like magic power carried by the spell bomb would corrode the bodies of all creatures. The creatures that could not resist this corrosion would be disintegrated from the inside. The magic would change and reassemble every piece of their flesh and every cell, making them die. Even the buildings could not escape this disaster. How? How is this possible? In the destructive storm, Nalai knelt on the ground. His slow and sluggish mind was slowly turning. Trade Federation. Tashimu. How can there be such a weapon? Caesar. Is this what you wanted to find? Dawn was cruel to the ruins of Orsay. Without the cover of the night, the destruction caused by the spell bomb could be seen clearly. Most of the flames had been extinguished, and the smoke was still rising slowly. There was no sound here, but the blue-purple energy radiance and a magic storm were still spreading. Its powerful power had affected the material plane and the space dimension. There were even scenes from other places in Iradia. Gravity seemed to have disappeared temporarily. Floating in the air were not only rocks and loose soil, but also the remains of buildings and weapon fragments. There were even some corpses of radiation dragons. Only they could leave behind corpses. The weak ones had all been disintegrated by magic power. The corpses slowly flipped in the air, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. They were as ferocious as they were when they were alive. When Phelan set foot on this land, this was the scene that greeted her. This was probably the greatest loss the Blackwing Empire had suffered since taking action against the Trade Federation. The clan members that had been sent here had all died. It was easy to imagine how furious the Black Emperor would be at this result. Something is still alive? Phelan was shocked. Her spell detected that there was still life in this place. She raised an eyebrow and immediately rushed to the location of the spell. The first thing the red dragon felt after regaining consciousness was pain. Every drop of blood, every muscle and nerve, every inch of skin and scales felt as if they were licked by the ice of hell. It struggled to open its eyes, moaning softly as it moved its body. However, the sharp increase in pain made it suck in a breath of cold air. Even breathing was extremely difficult, and the breath that came out of its throat was no longer as hot as before. It was unusually cold. A figure appeared in front of it. This is the price you have to pay for what you have done. Chapter 560. Nalai let out a low growl, gritting his teeth as he stood up shakily. This sturdy red dragon, now, seemed so weak. His body trembled violently as he opened his eyes and looked around. It was morning, but he could see the stars through the cracks in space. The magical phenomenon was faintly discernible. The color was like torn wounds and ugly sludge. This was the horrifying power of the demigod-level spell bomb. In front of the red dragon, Phelan Ramft was looking at him with a mocking gaze. Not having time to pay attention to the enemy in front of him, Nalai first lowered his head and opened his mouth, vomiting a pile of digestive substances. The intensity of the vomiting made one feel as if he was going to vomit out his own organs. The aftermath of the explosion made him dizzy, and the magical corrosion did not diminish for a long time. "You caused this explosion," Nalai said. In the meantime, he fell back to the ground. His limp limbs made him completely lose the ability to fight. He looked at Phelan Ramft in front of him, a look of horror in his eyes. Even the cruelest dragon would not do such a thing. "Why do you have to criticize me?" Phelan held her staff. "Blood for blood, violence for violence. To correct your mistakes, I have to use all kinds of extreme methods." "Roar!" Nalai roared, feeling both shocked and weak. But more than that, he felt fear and lingering fear. The Black Emperor had given him the command of the Blackwing clan. This army should have swept the central battlefield, but now, "You lunatic!" Phelan did not even bother to answer. She raised her staff, and the residual effects of the spell bomb strengthened her spell-casting ability. The red dragon was hit hard and flipped into the sky, smashing a floating rock into pieces before floating into the distance. The spreading ice froze and imprisoned the red dragon's limbs. Phelan smiled coldly, and her fingers gently moved to weave a spell, summoning the power of lightning out of thin air. She threw a crackling ball of lightning at the red dragon's body. Due to the enhanced effects of the spell bomb, this ball of lightning could exert a terrifying power. The red dragon screamed in pain, twitching as it fell from the sky. A bone-piercing whirlwind wrapped around it, preventing Nalai from successfully landing. The tornado seemed to be hiding 1,000 blades, peeling off the red dragon's scales one by one. Looking at the dragon's helpless appearance, Phelan's heart slowly but firmly filled with a cold pleasure. It keeps vomiting black and red blood spurting out from its fang mouth. Most of its body is paralyzed by the chain lightning, and the blades of the tornado are cutting its scales and skin. It must be extremely painful. Phelan thought, "This is good." She moved closer to the red dragon, letting her face get close to the red dragon's body until she could smell the stench of the dragon's breath. Lai lowered his head to look at her, the dragon's vertical pupils filled with fear. "Are you afraid?" Phelan felt that her voice at this moment must be very vicious. "You should be afraid, because you are just a mad dog raised by others, a mad dog that should be slaughtered. As long as you leave the protection of your master, you will show your weak side. Evil dragon, you despise mercy, then you will not receive mercy. You want to be slaughtered, then you will be slaughtered in the cruelest way possible." As she spoke, Phelan could no longer suppress the surging emotions in her heart. She stabbed the end of the magic wand into Lai's chest. Blood spurted out, covering her hand and splashing on her cheeks. The red dragon first let out a cry of pain, then could not help but laugh. Phelan did not expect that the beast could still laugh in such a situation. She pulled out the magic wand and stabbed it again. More blood spurted out. "You think I'm afraid of you?" The red dragon laughed weakly, but full of mockery. His voice gradually became louder. "Why should I be afraid of a dying person, an undead? Take a good look around. Child of God, Phelan ramped. Your time has come." Phelan subconsciously looked around vigilantly. This place was full of traces left by the Blackwing clan in the city of Orsay, but the magic bombs had completely destroyed them. Now, only the wreckage was left. Strangely, after the red dragon's voice died away, Phelan did feel a kind of fear, as if this evil dragon's words would become a reality in the future. She looked at the wreckage around her. That was Phelan blinked her eyes. Although it was not obvious, she still found some glowing objects, some broken pieces of magic stones that were constantly pulsating with magic energy. They looked very fragile, but they were able to survive the near-annihilation explosion. These things should be used by the Blackwing clan to build a teleportation circle. They wanted to build a large-scale teleportation circle in the city of Orsay that would allow them to cross different regions. Phelan's nerves were tingling. This meant that the magic energy was getting stronger and the sorcerer's stones were getting brighter. This did not make sense. They should have lost their power. What was controlling them? She subconsciously put her palms together, trying to cast a spell to stop the situation from worsening, but she heard the red dragon's excited roar. "It's too late. Shut up." Phelan lost her composure and screamed. A blade of light formed behind her and slashed towards the red dragon's neck. Unlike the previous two attacks, Phelan was determined to kill this red dragon this time. This blade of light had the effect of a legendary rank spell. Logically speaking, it should be able to cut off this weak red dragon's head. However, the light blade dissipated as soon as it was formed, returning to the most basic elemental particles. The wounded earth trembled violently. Sharp lightning flashed across the sky, and a storm appeared along with thunder. The cracks in the space became more exaggerated, and the magic images were colorful. The world under her feet was like a frightened child, screaming hysterically. A huge black shadow appeared in the sky above Orsay. It was a dragon, but it was far more majestic than the red dragon, Neliandria. Its huge wings could completely cover streams and fields, and its powerful claws could easily tear mountains apart. Dazzling waves of golden particles accompanied it, and the terrifying pressure made Phelan breathless for a moment. The Black Emperor on the throne, the only ruler of the northern world, the king of dragons, Caesar Orderonso, Tangerine. Phelan ramped suddenly felt a wave of nausea. She felt both physically and mentally exhausted and almost fell to the ground. The powerful dimensional pressure and lethal radiation had shrouded the area the moment the Dark Emperor appeared. Even if Phelan had the pure blood of the gods flowing in her body, she was not a true god, nor was she a monster like Achiliosis. It was difficult for her not to be affected by Caesar's various abilities. Nellie, after appearing, the Blackwing King first stared at the red dragon below, and his voice echoed in the sky. "I am very disappointed in you." Nelly lowered his head and crawled on the ground, not daring to make sound. "However, you did one thing right in the end." As he spoke, Caesar flapped his wings and landed, extending his sharp claws to Phelan. "Come, little girl, come to me." Chapter 561. Phelan was not lacking in insight. Before the black dragon completely appeared, she had already begun to retreat, wanting to keep a safe distance from this huge monster that suddenly appeared. However, there seemed to be countless chains intertwining around her, making it extremely difficult to flash short distances. It was even more difficult to escape through teleportation. Unable to resolve the situation easily, she had no choice but to carefully construct a defensive force field as she looked at the huge claw that was reaching towards her. Then, she cast several spells on herself and dodged the opponent's claw in a rather embarrassing manner. Black Emperor. Phelan retreated. At this time, she could not maintain her previous calm. The woman clenched her staff and looked up at the big monster in front of her with vigilance. "I am the daughter of the mysterious lady, the descendant of the mother of eternal magic," Phelan ramped. "What a long title." Caesar muttered, as if it was the first time he knew the identity of the other party. Then, he looked around, and his expression slowly turned cold and fierce. "Are you the one who destroyed Ulse?" The waves of golden particles spread out, and Phelan felt the pressure getting heavier and heavier. She tried to keep calm and said, "I am the Apocalypse, and the only one. Any attempt to attack me will incur the wrath of the Lord God. Caesar Tangerine, you will be responsible for what you do next. I hope you know what you are doing." "Huh, stupid woman." Nelly, who was lying motionless on the ground and peeking, thought. Seeing Phelan's nervous appearance, he felt that for the first time, he had the upper hand in terms of intelligence. "You destroyed Ulse." The black dragon muttered to himself as if he didn't hear Phelan's words and warning. Then, those strange vertical cracks in his eyes began to focus and stare at Phelan. The bloody mouth slowly opened, revealing a mouth full of fangs. "You are in my way." Roar. There was a low roar, but the sound wave that came out was so loud that it shook the sky. Nalai immediately covered his head as he watched the continuous explosion of light tear the ruined city of Orse into pieces. And this was only the prelude. An unprecedented blazing light suddenly attacked half a second later. The colorful city of Orse's original colorful colors disappeared. Everywhere the blazing light passed, black holes were formed, and spatial cracks were completely torn apart. One could even see the surging of dimensional vortexes. Fortunately, the blazing light only lasted for a second. Otherwise, the entire central region would be in great trouble. After the most intense bloom, the beam of light gradually shrank into a line and finally disappeared in front of the black dragon's open mouth. But Madeline was not dead. "Let her go, Caesar." Mistra appeared in front of the black dragon, floating in the air as she stared at Caesar. She was still in her human form, wearing a blue silk dress with 7 shining stars on her back. Madeline's identity was extraordinary, and the matriarch could not abandon her like she had abandoned the other priestesses. When Madeline's life was in danger, she had no choice but to appear and save her. Mistra descended with the grace and inviolability of a goddess. She didn't seem to do anything, but the chaotic flow of energy in Orse was slowly smoothed out. The torn space quickly stabilized, and elemental particles of different types began to fill up and circulate in an orderly manner. She looked at Caesar. "I do not wish to interfere with the affairs of this world. Madeline does not belong to this world. If you agree to let her go, I will be very grateful and give you my sincere blessings." "Mother." Madeline couldn't help but interrupt. She never thought that Mistra would speak to the black dragon in such a tone. The two were worlds apart. One was the mother of eternal magic, one of the most famous priestesses in the astral plane. The other was just a creature from the prime material plane. Even if it was a dragon with a different body, it wasn't enough to make the black dragon bow. "It's all because of me." Madeline wanted to say something, but Mistra turned to look at her. While she still had a gentle smile on her face, Madeline didn't dare to speak. The blessing of the goddess of magic. Caesar clicked his tongue. This was not something that could be talked about. The blessing of the goddess of magic did exist, and it was a holy gift that countless spellcasters in the material plane and even the astral plane dreamed of. Having it was equivalent to having a pass on the path of the strong. No matter how inferior a creature was, the blessing of the goddess of magic was enough to make it legendary. If it were a few decades ago, Caesar would have nodded excitedly and wagged his tail to hug Mistra's leg. However, the priestess of magic didn't pay attention to the dragon at that time. Now, the black dragon no longer needed such a thing. Didn't you hear me? This little girl is in my way. Sometimes, a small obstacle is enough to ruin an important plan, Caesar said fiercely. He found that playing the role of the evil was very easy for him. How can a small compensation make up for such a huge loss? What huge loss? Mistra thought to herself. It's just a few magic stones and a radiation dragon. Aren't they just tools to you? Mistra instinctively thought that the dragon was trying to learn from its ancestors and extort them for benefits. She put on a cold expression and asked, "Then what do you want as compensation?" Caesar wanted to say, "I want you," but he felt that it wasn't right. Based on Mistra's usual behavior, saying that would not only not anger her, but also put him in a dangerous position. Mistra wasn't exactly an all-rounder, but her private life wasn't any better than Tiamat's. Her known lovers included Kalimver, the king of the dead, Ogma, the elven god Corlon, and so on. She also had hundreds of non-famous gods, supernatural creatures, and followers. The black dragon thought for a moment and chose the most common and useful words. He bared his fangs and said with a greedy expression, "I want your divinity. It seems that you mistake politeness for weakness." How laughable. I thought that the Blackwing King, who rose to fame so quickly, would be able to ignore the influence of Tiamat's bloodline. Mistra looked at Caesar with disdain. "I didn't expect you to be so greedy and foolish. You're too greedy, you ignorant fool. Your appetite is too big." A majestic aura erupted from her, raging like the waves of flood. Neri clutched his head as he fell to the ground, while Phelan knelt and bowed with all her heart. All of her senses were trembling, and Mistra was the only one left in the world. God's might. Ugh, Caesar yawned and said, "You don't have to bluff anymore. I've seen a lot of gods. The power of your projection has been almost exhausted when you block my breath. You don't dare to come in the form of a saint, but you should at least give this projection a part of the divinity, right? If you can't even do that, then your descendant is doomed." Chapter 562. With the descent of her divinity, the central city of Orsay was transformed into a land of arcane magic. The overflowing energy was like the boundless starry sky, the intertwining laws and arcane spells forming a curtain that couldn't be sorted out. Endless elemental energy flowed and converged. Every glimpse of what one could feel would benefit any caster for the rest of their life. Only Mistra could control such a majestic environment. She was the ultimate arcane mage, the controller of the weave. Without the suppression of the material plane, she could easily take the black dragon's life. Even the two dragon gods, Bahamut and Tiamat, wouldn't be able to gain any advantage in front of her. The mother of magic wandered around the energy, gently moving her fingers to refine and purify the elemental power, simplifying it into a spell model that could be cast in the main material plane. Then, the power of the arcane spell spread through her mind, and a fist-sized fireball exploded with a loud bang, spreading into a curtain of fire that covered the sky and earth. Caesar flapped his steel wings to defend himself, but was suddenly blown away by a raging hurricane. The curtain of fire turned into a hurricane and a glacier, crashing towards the black dragon. The energy combined and separated without restraint, evolving into hundreds of different forms. Apart from the most common earth, water, wind, and fire, there were also acid swamps, magma, poisonous fog, sonic booms, vacuum, radiation, dust, and flashes. Coupled with strange spatial disturbances and changes in gravity, Caesar was unable to catch his breath. Acleosis, the self-proclaimed elemental king, seemed like a child's play compared to Mistra. He had the ability to control the elements and arcane magic, but he only knew how to use brute force. If not for that, Caesar wouldn't have dared to take the risk of entering the astral plane to kill him. Hold on, Caesar thought. Acleosis, this elemental abomination, could he be a descendant of the mother of magic and some other ancient creature? At the same time, a strange vibration came from within the black dragon's psionic space. This was the cage of the abomination. After his god fire was taken away, Acleosis had gone berserk, struggled, and begged for mercy. Recently, he had slowly accepted reality and calmed down. Now, however, he was restless again, using all his strength to shake Caesar's psionic space. In the midst of the battle, Caesar was multitasking. He scanned the area with his mind and found Achilleos screaming and howling. This bastard was shouting Mistra's name, cursing the mother of magic for her cruelty and heartlessness. Kill her, kill her! As expected, Caesar's suspicions were quickly confirmed. Acleosis was a descendant of the mother of magic. As a deity, Mistra had mated with some unknown ancient creature, giving birth to a twisted, shameful mutant. As a failed divine child, Acleosis' only fate was to be exiled to the astral plane. He was born without expectations, humiliated and deformed. When he first opened his eyes to observe the world, he saw his mother, Mistra, looking at him with hatred and anger. Acleosis, who had been exiled, struggled to survive in the dangerous astral plane. After hundreds of years, Acleosis and his mother had finally met again. Kill her! Kill her! Unfortunately, emotions couldn't be shared. Caesar wasn't interested in such matters. He only felt that Acleosis was noisy. In his eyes, Mistra was no different from Tiamat, Umberlee, and Malor, only stronger. In order to focus on the battle, Caesar prepared to seal Acleosis' psionic space and shut him up. No! Sensing Caesar's intentions, the abomination roared loudly, causing the psionic space to tremble incessantly. Acleosis, who had suffered from the backlash, had his body burned. However, his eyes were bloodshot as he roared with a ferocious expression. Kill her! Kill her! I'll give you everything. What else do you have to trade? Caesar's interest was piqued, and he waved his claw to disperse the waves of arcane magic as he communicated with the divine abomination. Everything! A roar sounded from the divine abomination's heart. You didn't kill me, which means I'm still useful. Kill that bitch, and I'll be yours to command. Kill her, kill her. Why should I take the blame for this bitch's indulgence? But this is just a projection. Then kill the other one. Crush that bastard. Why can she enjoy the love of her parents while I can't? Caesar glanced at Phelon, who was being protected by Mistra, and thought for a moment, all right, as you wish. A tsunami of elemental flames spewed out from the mother of magic, melting through space. The black dragon's psionic barrier only lasted for a few seconds before collapsing. Mistra's body had already turned into elemental energy, the color of platinum. Different types of energy collided with each other, causing sparks to fly out like fireworks. There was indeed a world of difference between an overgod and a lesser god. If not for Caesar's body and elemental armor, he might have been defeated. Acleosis' words gave Caesar an idea. He did not really intend to fight the mother of magic to the death. He just wanted to distract the mother of magic as much as possible so that his ally, Talos Gush, the Lord of Storms, could steal the clergy. However, the mother of magic knew how to control the situation well. The amount of divinity and divine power that she had invested was just right. It was enough to suppress the black dragon, overlord of Eladia, but it would not make her too busy to care about other things. The only way to force her to invest more divine power was to anger her to the point where she lost her rationality. However, how could an overgod of order that had lived for countless eras be so easily angered? Unless it crossed her bottom line, the descendants she had painstakingly nurtured. Rumble. Dark clouds rumbled as the dragon's back lit up, shrouding his face in darkness. Only his eyes were like the rising sun amidst the black tide, so powerful that one couldn't look directly at them. What word could be used to describe that look? Cruel, ruthless, disdainful. Phelan shuddered. She saw the black dragon stare at her for a while before letting out a long sigh, as if it had made a decision. Chains of lightning struck its body, turning into beautiful patterns that flowed in all directions. The Mother of Magic's expression changed, and she said to Phelan, "Run." Boom. The black dragon's wings suddenly spread out, and the airwaves on both sides rose up to the sky. Its body turned into a roaring wave. Before Phelan could do anything, she saw the black dragon suddenly appear on the protective barrier that her mother had built for her. After a solid collision, this monstrous black dragon actually did not need to catch its breath. Its huge body turned like lightning, and with a claw, it tore apart the arcane barrier. Mistra clasped her hands together, her elemental body suddenly growing in size and covering Phelan's figure. All of the elements were converted into electricity. High up in the sky, the electric snake was like a pillar that connected the heavens and the earth. Billions of electric currents surrounded it. In order to protect Phelan, the total amount of energy that the Mother of Magic exploded in an instant was already close to the limit of the material plane. Her eyes were completely filled with lightning. Her huge elemental arm flew into the air and grabbed the top of the lightning pillar. To the creatures of the material plane, this scene was undoubtedly shocking and full of visual impact. However, in the next moment, Mistra's eyes widened as she saw the black dragon grab onto the pillar of light. The 70-meter-long black dragon stomped its hind legs on the ground and raised its body like a human. Its claws wrapped around the pillar of light, and then it opened its mouth and bit down on the lightning. Even the Origin Substance armor was unable to withstand this kind of destructive power. However, even though its entire body was trembling and spasming, the black dragon still held onto it tightly, and then unhesitatingly used its fangs to tear at it. The light from the explosion instantly illuminated hundreds of miles, and the electricity spread along the ground. Not only did the lightning pillar collapse, but even the elemental body of the Mother of Magic also showed signs of disintegration. Phelan was stunned. Her face was full of disbelief, and she stood there with her mouth wide open, not knowing what to do. At this moment, the black dragon's terrifying claws reached in, grabbing and crushing the pillar of light. Chapter 563. The storm of energy raged, and Nerit was blown away helplessly. Just the debris that escaped from the center of the storm was enough to shock him to the core. The surging elements sang a war song amidst the frenzied battle, with dark clouds billowing and the ground churning. At the center of the vortex, the Mother of Magic and the black dragon's body of steel became the only thing in the world. The sparks that sputtered when their bodies touched were enough to burn a legend to death. The atmosphere suddenly became strange. The Mother of Magic's bright eyes revealed shock and confusion, and a haze covered her eyes. In the next moment, the haze turned into fire and lightning. "You dare kill a descendant of a god." Mistra's voice was no longer as gentle and warm as before. She had lost the characteristics of her gender and species, leaving behind only a resplendent divine might. One could feel the fury of the goddess of magic just by listening to her voice. In that instant, not only did the black dragon shatter Phelan Ramp's body, but also used extreme methods to annihilate her soul, completely destroying any possibility of Phelan going to the divine kingdom to be reborn. Caesar knew that things tainted by the gods would not be easily killed. Only by doing so could he truly enrage the goddess of magic. Nalai hurriedly retreated even further. The situation was getting worse. This wasn't a battle that a small red dragon like him could participate in. Even if he wanted to help the black dragon, he was powerless. He couldn't even bite off a piece of skin from Mistra's projection. "My beloved daughter, she is the best candidate to take over my priesthood. How dare you destroy all of this?" Mistra enunciated each word clearly as she extracted the divinity from the projection. Your flesh will be used as a sacrifice. The elements collapsed, and Mistra's projection disappeared. Then, the earth of old spewed out flames that soared into the sky. Dark clouds gathered, thunder rumbled, and a high-pitched horn sounded. Hundreds of millions of elements gathered in this place from all directions, forming streamers of light, as if they were paying homage to their king. In the end, 7 giant stars appeared in Iradia's night sky. The elements formed a blurry figure whose gender was indistinguishable. It was ancient, majestic, and incomparable. Where I descend, no blasphemy shall be allowed. A domain of unknown scale appeared, affecting not only Orsay but also neighboring Mernin and Prin. Even the other federations in the Central Lands were affected. In my sight, all evil shall be drowned. Neri, who was trembling in the distance, let out a low roar. The terrifying domain was suppressing all the creatures of the evil camp. He subconsciously looked at the Black-Winged King and realized that the Black Emperor's tall body was also slightly hunched. With my words, the elements shall be eternal. Boundless energy gathered around the ancient figure, a terrifying aura that intimidated all sentient creatures. And Mistra's divine will. Caesar looked up at the goddess of magic's reconstructed body, his muscles twitching involuntarily. His acute senses warned him of a powerful threat. Although he didn't know how many divinities Mistra had left behind, he was certain that it wasn't a small number. Farewell. The dark dragon turned around and fled without any hesitation. He did not even say a single word. His actions left Neville, who was trembling in fear in the distance, dumbfounded. He had thought that Caesar still had some tricks up his sleeves, and that an even more intense battle would break out. He did not expect that the Dark Emperor, who was at the peak of Aridia, the famous Dragon King, would actually flee just like that. Caesar's figure flickered, the flames spewing from the bottom of his wings of steel, allowing him to withstand the domain. He shrunk his body a few times and escaped from the center of the elemental storm, but the goddess of magic's eyes still shot out beams of light that followed him like a shadow. Word of truth, death. This was the first spell Mistra had uttered since she'd appeared. She was the only ruler of the domain around her, and spells that didn't belong to the material plane could be used at this moment. The terror of a god was undeniable. Once she uttered a death spell, any creature within range would be killed instantly. Caesar, who was flying through the air, suddenly trembled. His chest suddenly exploded. Armor scales and flesh splattered everywhere. In the material plane, no matter how heavy an attack was, it would not be able to cause such a great injury to him. His armor was destroyed, and his flesh was torn apart. However, this attack came from the inside of his body. The death spell first shattered his heart, followed by a series of chain explosions. In the end, it was his armor that exploded. Blood gushed out of Caesar's mouth. Death spells were fatal to ordinary creatures, and no material life could escape from the hands of the goddess of magic. The flames behind the black dragon were extinguished, and it began to wobble as it plummeted to the ground. Mistra was expressionless as she watched the scene unfold before her. After losing her descendant, she had shed her gentle and warm exterior, revealing her true self as a goddess. Talos, are you done yet? It won't be that easy. Give me some time. Stall him. Are you kidding me? Who do you think I am? A greater god? My life is in danger at any moment. I have to increase the stakes. All right. The black dragon seemed to have lost its life after being struck by the death spell. It didn't move, but it maintained its balance and didn't fall head over heels. When the goddess of magic realized something was wrong, she straightened her back, flames appearing at the tips of her wings once more as she changed direction and flew away at an even faster speed. Mistra realized that she'd underestimated this dragon. Death spells weren't fatal to it. No one knew that the black dragon's heart and brain had crystallized during its last hibernation. Even if it was shattered, it could reform itself. Strictly speaking, this monster was no longer a material life form. If she wanted to kill it, she'd have to use the same method she used to deal with evil, hatred, and curses. No, a low voice echoed in the sky. Caesar flew for dozens of miles. Just as he was about to catch his breath, the cold voice of the goddess of magic came from behind him. You must be sacrificed today. Word of truth, annihilation. Edict, spotless land. Iradia and the goddess of magic were engaged in a fierce battle in the skies of an unknown region. This was the first time in a century that Caesar was being chased and attacked. Spells other than Edict were child's play to the goddess of magic. He could only rely on his strong body and breath to deal with the goddess of magic. Hurricanes, whirlwinds, lightning, flames, and all sorts of other elements danced wildly. In the struggle of life and death, Caesar tried his best to stop the mother of magic, but it seemed that he would not be able to hold on for long. At this moment, the raging main god suddenly stopped moving. Damn it! Someone was trying to steal her divine domain at this moment. How is this possible? How did the goddess of magic enter her divine kingdom without being discovered? Mistress shuddered. The goddess of magic must have been planning this for hundreds or even thousands of years. This matter isn't over yet. You'll be punished sooner or later, Black Dragon. The goddess of magic glared at Caesar with eyes full of resentment and hatred. She gave him a final blow and sent him tumbling in the air. Then, she immediately withdrew her divine spark and divinity, and her body collapsed and broke away from the material plane. Chapter 564. When Caesar returned to the north, Luna was hopping with anxiety. The little black dragon had lied about going to the elven forest and slipped away on its own. Not long after, on the other side of the empire, the radiation dragons in the Black Rock Mountains sent news that their attempt to intercept the Black Dragon Princess had failed, and that His Highness Odin had entered the Black Rock Mountain. What kind of place was the Black Rock Mountain? It was a node where the abyssal demons invaded the material plane and the dwelling of the Balrog King Asliers. It was definitely one of the most dangerous places in the north, or even the entire Iradia. The Dark Dragon had actually barged in? Luna held her head, feeling a little dizzy. Big stupid dragon, you're finally back. Do you know that little Odin ran into the Black Rock Mountain? What should we do? Luna hugged the bulge on the Black Dragon's head, her little face bitter and about to cry. She pointed at the leaders of the court and complained, I told them to bring the little dragon back, but they didn't listen to me. It's definitely over now. Lich Ryan and Bone Dragon Angramo stayed in a corner and watched. Hog lowered his head and kept silent, while Nero lay on the ground, looking innocently at Caesar. Don't worry, Odin is fine. The Black Dragon, who had rushed back from the central continent, had just caught his breath and hurriedly comforted the little one. It's not that they didn't listen to you, but I told them not to go. Otherwise, these guys would have rushed into the Black Rock Mountain long ago. Luna raised her head and looked at him with puzzled eyes. My psionic seed is in the Black Rock Mountain. Caesar pointed at his head. The radiation dragons would inform me immediately if there were any abnormalities in that place. I received news that Odin had entered the Black Rock Mountain a long time ago, but according to the surveillance, there were no high-level battles in the Black Rock Mountain. If Asliers didn't make a move, the average little demon shouldn't be able to do anything to Odin. Also, as he spoke, Caesar held Luna in his claws. Just like you, Odin has my true scale on him. As long as he calls for help, I will immediately rush over. Even if he encounters a terrifying crisis where he can't even call for help, the true scale's passive protection will allow me to sense it. However, none of this has happened. This proves that Odin can handle everything so far. There is no danger. But Luna was still a little hesitant. They reported that the Balrog King has awakened, so you should go and take a look. Even if the little dragon is not in danger, you have to bring her back. Staying with the demons in the Black Rock Mountain will definitely turn bad. You can't do that. All right, while you're at it, ask Asliers about the progress of the abyssal invasion. At this time, Odin was in the underground palace of the Black Rock Mountain, looking at the dome with admiration. The gigantic Balrog King was creating a hurricane to reshape his palace. Magma gushed out from the cracks in the ground and then solidified into various shapes in the air. Commanding these demons is really troublesome because no matter how many times you teach them, they won't follow the plan you expect. Just like every time I fall asleep, they will always bite each other and mess up my territory. I have to take care of it again after I wake up. Asliers shrunk his body and landed. He snorted and said, "On this point, I envy your stupid father. Look at those dragons around the Black Rock Mountain. They're very obedient and quietly waiting for death. The Black Rock Mountain is our strategic location. This place has a node that connects to the Helibator. As long as we can get through there, the kings of the abyss can immediately cross over to the material plane. If we occupy many of these nodes, even the gods will not be able to stop us from conquering Iradia," Asliers said fiercely. "My father doesn't know that there's a node here?" Odin asked. Asliers pondered for a moment and did not answer. He said to himself, "Let me show you the territory of the kings of the abyss." The Balrog king led Odin into the depths of the Black Rock Mountain. The further they went, the wider their field of vision became. Finally, they saw buildings in the distance. It looked like a town spread out in front of them. There were flame towers that bred Balrogs, arenas with flowing magma, and slaughterhouses and crypts everywhere. In the center of the town was a huge palace. In front of the palace stood a demon statue that reached the dome. The demon guards on both sides saw Asliers coming and immediately stood with their weapons raised. Is this really underground? Odin was a little surprised. Unbelievable? This is the power of the demons. Asliers was very satisfied with the expression on Odin's face. Compared to the power of the kings of the abyss, Caesar's power is insignificant. Do you know? Your stupid father actually wants to stop the invasion of the abyss by himself. It's simply unreasonable. Isn't it just bullying with numbers? You make it sound so dignified. Odin curled her lips. What a joke. The Black Dragon is at most a demigod. Every king of the abyss is comparable to a god. If we cannot be suppressed by the laws of the worlds, he can only tremble under the rolling wheels of the demons. Any king can easily crush your father. Asliers was not convinced. Stubborn. Odin complained in her heart. At this time, the resonance that originated from the bloodline made her realize something. The little dragon in fairy form raised her head and smiled at the Balrog king. My father is here. He dares. Asliers was about to continue bragging when his expression suddenly changed. The aura of his whole body burst out and prepared for battle. He roared at the torn void in front of him. Caesar, how dare you trespass into my territory without my permission? Hasn't it always been like this? After appearing, Caesar casually glanced around and walked forward with his tail wagging. TSK. To secretly build such a large building underground, it seems that he really thinks of this as his lair. Father. Odin flapped her wings and came to the Black Dragon's side. Why are you here? Your mother is worried about you, Caesar said to his daughter dotingly. He then turned to the Balrog king. Weren't you going into hibernation? Why have you awakened in just 3 years? Asliers' nostrils spurted out 2 streams of flames. Some fellows broke into my territory, slaughtered my people, and disturbed my slumber. I'm going to settle this score with you, Caesar. I'll compensate you if you win. Caesar raised his chin. Come, the flames will purify everything. The little dragon subconsciously retreated, thinking that a wonderful battle was about to break out. Unexpectedly, Asliers raised his claw, and flames burst out behind him, forming a huge ring of flames. He then pulled out a stack of obsidian elegy cards from the ring. Odin was dumbfounded. She watched as the Black Dragon also took out his cards from the psionic space. Both sides, one on the ground and one on the ground, began to play cards. Burn you to death! Burn you to death! Hearing Asliers' shouts, Odin's little face twitched, not knowing where to start. This damned demon. Is he so familiar with my father? Then why was he so fierce to me in the beginning? Chapter 565. You're actually interested in procreation. As expected, no matter how strong or weak one is, material creatures can never escape the pursuit of a lower level. Aslier said as he tried to sneak a peek at Caesar's hand. Odin is the continuation of my life. Procreation is the most basic requirement of a dragon's genes. Species that do not pursue procreation have long gone extinct in the endless eras. Caesar sat on the ground and pulled the little dragon into his arms, curling his lips in disdain. You elementals don't know shit. Burden, all of you are a burden. The Balrog king moved his skull closer and stared at Odin before shaking his head. Immortality is what beings of our level should pursue. Caesar, your structure cannot match your strength. Let's not talk about that. Black Dragon changed the topic, trying to get some information out of Aslier's. How did you wake up so quickly? Has the worm-eaten passage of the abyss approached Iradia? As I said, it was your daughter who broke into my territory without permission and disturbed this lord's slumber. As for the progress of the worm-eaten passage, the Balrog king chuckled. I can't tell you. Although we can barely be considered partners, I have to swear loyalty to the Lord of the Dark Cloud in name and in reality. I can't reveal any strategic information about the Abyss. There's been news recently. Because the Abyss is about to invade the material plane, the gods have decided to put aside their prejudices and form an allied army with the divine race to enter the prime material plane and set up defenses against Iradia in advance. Caesar said, Haha, boring information. Flames spewed out of Aslier's head. These hindrances always appear at the right time, but they're always beaten to a pulp by us. One day, we will rush into their divine kingdoms and crush them one by one. What about the devils? Black Dragon asked. The Flame Devil King glared at him. You have news about those bugs? Compared to the gods and the celestials, the devils are the real problem for the demons. Although they both belong to the evil camp, the nature of order and chaos on both sides was extremely opposite. After hundreds of thousands of years of bloody war, the demons had invested an unknown number of troops, but they had never been able to break through the solid fortress of Bador. On the battlefield of the material plane, the demons had never gained any advantage over the devils. Aslier's became serious at the mention of the devil. Caesar stopped talking. He lowered his head and fiddled with the colorful hair on little Odin's head. After a short silence, Aslier's suddenly smiled and stood up. Speaking of which, you visited my territory so many times, but I haven't treated you well. Since I've brought this little one along, please give me a molten scale maintenance. You can't enjoy it anywhere else. Caesar nonchalantly followed the Fire Demon King to a palace. The ground was flat, and in the middle was a large sunken pool. Magma surged in it, and there was a steel staircase beside it for servants to go up and down. There was even a tall suspension hanging at the top. The twisted air above the pool indicated the terrifying temperature, but Caesar did not care. He directly went in and found a comfortable position to lie down. Odin turned into his dragon form and followed suit. He lay down beside the black dragon. The Baler pulled a mechanism, and the hole above the palace rumbled. Then, a column of water washed down, flowing along the thorny back of the black dragon. Caesar grabbed it with his claws and found that it was not water, but finely ground ore. It had a strong sulfuric and corrosive smell. Ordinary creatures would definitely not be able to withstand it, but to the black dragon, this thing seemed to be able to kill germs and remove mold. Dozens of succubi with collars around their necks entered the room, followed by a few female flame imps. The flame imps whipped the succubi who were of a higher level than them and scolded, "Move faster, don't let the guests wait." I've never seen these succubi before. They should be Aslier's personal stash, Caesar thought. The succubi picked up a large brush as large as a tower shield and scrubbed along the scales. The black dragon's back was too high, so they had to switch to longer brushes. They stood on either side of the black dragon and pulled back and forth like sawing wood. It's really time to wash up, Caesar thought. He had done a lot of things on this trip. First, he had gone to capture the elemental abomination Acleosis. Then, he had taken a look at Glagia. And finally, he had fought with the goddess of magic's divine projection. The overwhelming elemental energy had shattered the scales, leaving behind blood, mud, and dust that had seeped into the cracks. He hadn't had time to clean it up. "Oh yeah, I brought you a gift when I went out this time," Caesar said to the little dragon that was lying beside him as he recalled his promise with Odin. "Huff, huff, it's so hot. I can't take it anymore," Odin cried out, flapping his wings and jumping up. "Father, you wash up first. I'll wait at the side. As for the gift, you have to secretly give it to me at home." Okay. All sorts of smells floated into the pool, and after 3 rounds of water, even more succubi walked in and formed a line in front of the black dragon. These were the spoils of war that Asliers had captured from the 570th floor. They were dressed in a dignified manner, but each of them held a barbed scythe in their hands. "What are they doing?" Odin's jaw dropped. The flame fiend in charge waved his hand, and the succubi climbed onto Caesar's body. They carefully used their scythes to reach into the cracks of Caesar's scales, swaying left and right before pulling with all their might. A worm the size of a succubi's arm was pulled out, its long mandibles connected to the flesh beneath the black dragon's scales. It had no eyes and was extremely violent. Caesar felt a slight itch on his back. He turned around to look at the worm that was being bitten by the succubi. "Oh, this parasite isn't afraid of radiation. Has it mutated?" The black dragon shook his tail awkwardly. The other succubi then used their scythes to pull the worm out of Caesar's body. They used the half-melted molten core to repair the black dragon's scales and polish his burrs. A few demon warlocks then walked in, several lightning elemental snakes coiling around them. "No need to polish it. Mr. electrocuted me quite badly." Caesar refused their next move and stood up from the lava pool. "Where's Asliers? You're really glowing right now. How is it? Are you satisfied?" The Flame Fiend King's large head appeared at the entrance of the palace. "I have to say, your level of enjoyment is beyond my expectations. I didn't prepare such luxuries for myself in the Blackwing Court." Caesar glanced at Odin. "All right, let's get down to business. Give me the progress of the abyssal worm's corrosion, and I'll give you information on a devil so that you can ask for credit from your sovereign." "What credit?" Asliers shook his head in dissatisfaction, gesturing for the demons to leave. "I'm investigating the enemy. There aren't many lords in the abyss who are as scheming as me." Caesar didn't care about that. "I saw Glagia. She wanted me to cut off your head." "That bitch?" The flames in his eyes rose by more than an octave. "Is it a projection or her real body?" "Of course it's a real body. What's there to talk about if it's a projection? The devils and gods have already entered Iradia. They're much faster than you. What about the coordinates? Where are those worms' teleportation nodes?" "I'll tell you immediately. Give me the progress of the abyssal worm's corrosion." Caesar wagged his tail. Asriers pondered for a moment before saying, "Due to the urging of the demon prince, we have temporarily suspended our attack on Bador and focused our forces on digging a tunnel. According to the current allocation of resources, the progress will be greatly accelerated. In about 70 years, the demons will be able to ascend to Eladia." "Understood." Caesar picked up Odin and prepared to leave. "The coordinates are at the bottom of your lava pool. Hey, whose side are you on?" "Iradia's side." Chapter 566. This is an abomination. Odin stared at the elemental figure in the corner, his head full of question marks. Of course, even though its god fire has been removed and it's suppressed by the material plane, it's still a true abomination. Caesar snorted. "Come, Achilleos, show me your power." "Enough." The figure in the corner suddenly jumped up and opened its arms. "I've had enough of your humiliation, you demon." "You agreed to it yourself." Caesar pursed his lips. "That doesn't mean I'll become a toy for your descendants. If I can recover my full strength one day, I will chop you filthy bugs into pieces," roared Achilleos furiously. Odin flicked it away with a finger. "This fellow doesn't look like an abomination at all. I told you if one day... you're going to crush me. Ouch, 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 ouch. All right, play by yourself. This fellow won't die so easily. Just make sure it doesn't come into contact with divine matter." Seeing Odin fiddle with the elemental abomination, Caesar yawned and flicked his tail as he left Nightmare Dragon's room. He rested for a while in his bedroom before heading straight for the depths of the royal court. Under the Black Dragon's control, the barrier was fully activated. Extremely dense spiritual energy gathered as the 6 spikes shot out arcane source threads, drawing a diagram of a lightning emblem. The next moment, a terrifying wave of divine force crashed down on him. Caesar immediately returned to his original form, resisting the violent waves of divine force and facing the undefiable might. A terrifying figure condensed in front of the Black Dragon, the sovereign of storms and destruction, Talos. "You've succeeded," Caesar raised his chin. "Of course, I've obtained a part of Mystra's independent and almost perfect divine domain." Talos' tone was filled with pride. "But my arrangements are far more than that. If the entire plan is revealed, I believe that the other overgod's fragile nerves will definitely collapse." "I don't care about your plan," Caesar said calmly. "I just want to get the reward I deserve. You've gained the friendship of a sovereign. Isn't that enough?" Talos laughed. The Black Dragon sneered and didn't say anything. It wagged its tail and stared at the other party. "It's not easy to take advantage of you mutated dragons." Talos sighed. "My dear follower Mailer, I wanted to kill him directly, but I didn't expect this beast to foresee danger and escape in advance. But what he left behind is enough for you." As he spoke, Talos tossed out a diamond-shaped black gem. Caesar's will penetrated the gem and saw the divine crystal within. It was dark, wild, and bloody, like a predator in the wilderness at night. This was the divine crystal of the black-blooded beast Mailer, the god of the hunt. Compared to this portion of divinity, the Tiamat divinity fragment that Caesar had previously obtained was simply insignificant, like a meteor compared to a planet. Caesar swallowed the divinity crystal right in front of the Lord of Storms. Talos faltered slightly before he burst into laughter. "Ah, very good. You're already like Kuangu, Dios, and Mad Clamor. I look forward to the day you step onto the stage of the astral realm." "It won't be long." The Black Dragon blinked, and golden cracks appeared in his pupils. After that, Caesar lived a very normal life. He completely ignored the internal affairs of the empire and focused on accompanying Luna and teaching Odin. 2 weeks later, he paid a visit to the fairy forest as per Luna's request. When the terrifying black figure flew over the fairy forest again, the Taya elves' reaction was completely different from before. They all walked out of their homes and looked up at the gargantuan figure in the sky. Even though they weren't all that respectful, there was no longer any animosity in their eyes. He landed on the empty space on the branch of the world tree. After waiting for a while, Queen Garcia Whispering Wind appeared. At first, she had a solemn expression on her face, but then she adjusted her state of mind as she walked, removing her serious expression. Caesar nodded at her, and the Black Dragon and the elf bowed to each other. Garcia was now the queen of the Elven Dukedom, and in front of her brethren, the Black Dragon deliberately displayed his respect for the queen. He cut straight to the chase. "I'm about to fall into a deep slumber for a long time, so I can't take a look at the fairy forest before that. What about the war? The war between the Wolfheart Dukedom and the Trade Federation?" Garcia asked. "You know that I'm the mastermind behind all of that? Isn't that obvious? Other than you, who else can command so many northern countries and mobilize such a large army? The war will continue, and a terrible disaster will befall this continent. Before that, Iradia must be unified." Caesar looked up at the green leaves on the world tree. It had taken root and sprouted here, and the branches were full of small silver flowers. "I'm so tired." Garcia sighed. "It was better when we were isolated from the world. All the changes in Iradia have nothing to do with the fairy forest. The customs and traditions from thousands of years ago are still maintained here. Do you regret the change?" "No. As the queen, there's no such thing as regret." Garcia shook her head and said, "I just feel very tired. Can you let me lean on you for a while?" Caesar looked at her in surprise. This was the first time Garcia had made such a request in a long time. The Elven Queen also looked up at him, her eyes sparkling. "Just for a while." Caesar nodded and lay down on his side, curling up his tail. "You have to take me to visit Luna's parents later. Garcia sat down beside him, holding the black dragon's tail with her hand, and pressed her face against the scales around Caesar's ribs. Are all creatures subconsciously attracted to powerful beings? Logically speaking, I should hate you for what you've done. Oh. Caesar was a little embarrassed. He did not understand what Garcia was trying to say, and he was not good at dealing with such situations. After a moment of silence, he could not help but break the strange atmosphere. I heard that elves love to listen to stories. Do you have a story? Let's talk about the epic of the Horde and the Alliance. Luna loves it. Caesar narrated the epic of another world that had been rewritten by him. All kinds of classic lines emerged one after another. His drawn-out tone and occasional exclamations echoed in the forest, but they were gently blocked by the world tree. The afternoon sun was very warm, leaving behind fine golden spots. After visiting Luna's parents and bidding farewell to Garcia, Caesar returned to the Blackwing Empire. He went straight to the rock mountain where the molten dead iron was made, burrowed into the deepest part of the ground, and fell into a deep sleep under the care of countless members of the Blackwing clan. The divine fire of the abomination and the crystal of Mailer's divinity, with the help of Black Dream, would produce a terrifying chemical effect in Caesar's body. Gods, demons, when I wake up, I'll kill all of you. Chapter 567. When Emperor Caesar fell into a deep sleep, the empire's military forces began to be reorganized. This huge force was mainly divided into three large groups, namely the Blackwing Garrison in the Sighing Stronghold, the Goblin Technology Corps in the Yellow Samland, and Victor's Orc Armed Forces. These three groups accounted for more than 60% of the empire's power. The rest were the Dragonmaw clan, the Northern Fleet, the Investigation Army of Air Sala, and so on. In the Blackwing Empire, there were no laws related to the military obligations of civilians. In other words, the people of this country would not be recruited into the army other than paying taxes and doing labor. They would not be asked to be in charge of logistics for military operations. Such a situation was unprecedented in Iradia. For the first time, the Blackwing Empire completely expelled civilians from the battlefield. We don't need any untrained civilians because they're useless except for wasting the Empire's weapons and equipment. This was what Emperor Caesar said when he vetoed this bill. After the vetoed bill was enacted, its impact was shocking. It directly caused many people to migrate to the north, causing a large-scale migration in Iradia for several years. After all, in this world, being exempted from military service was an incomparably happy thing for ordinary people. However, the greatest achievements these outsiders could achieve in the north were the merchants and farm owners who were protected by the country. The empire's administrative department was composed of graduates and retired soldiers. Civilians who did not serve in the military were not qualified to hold any public office, but it was enough for them. The authority and iron law of the Blackwing Empire ensured their safety. Civilians only needed to pay taxes according to the law to live a good life. Just based on this point alone, the North was far ahead of other countries. Back to the military, the distant Trade Federation had war reports to the royal court every day. Ever since Air Sala received the support of the Empire's dragons, its strength had more than doubled. However, it was not that the enemy did not have any support. As the influence of the war in the central region increased, more and more strong people appeared on the battlefield. Among them, there were even existences that could injure or even kill the radiation dragons. In the war reports sent to the royal court, there was more than one case of the death of the radiation dragons. In the south, people thought that the Blackwing Empire was evil, so the believers of the gods would enthusiastically resist the invasion of the Blackwing Empire. There were also those damned adventurers. Those stupid fellows had a sense of justice from the perspective of the locals, causing them to replace the defeated federal army and become the core force resisting the invasion of the Dragon Empire. They were active in the rear battlefield, causing the invading army to be badly battered. I can't stand that red dragon's incompetence anymore. Before the great emperor wakes up, we must take over the Trade Federation. That was the consensus reached by the lords of the royal court 3 years after Caesar fell into a deep slumber. Thus, with the consent of the Black Dragon Princess, the royal court sent more troops to the central region. The Blackwing clan had appeared on the central battlefield. Compared to Ursula's weakness and the Red Dragon's incompetence, these war machines under the direct command of the Empire were not so benevolent. Under the attack of the Blackwing clan, all resistors and the towns they occupied would be mercilessly crushed. Most of the people would be killed instantly. Those who surrendered would be enslaved. The very few heroes who could fight would be escorted to the Blackwing Empire's arena. Because they were promised the hope of regaining their freedom, they would kill each other and bleed. Under the cruel methods of the Blackwing clan, the resistance army that was originally everywhere began to extinguish like a candle flame. Those towns that were scared out of their wits refused to allow the resistance forces to enter and refused to provide them with any help. When the entire central region was shrouded in black terror, the dawn of the main battlefield finally appeared. Earl Mance, who came from the empire where the sun never sets, was also an adventurer before he inherited the title of Earl. He had once ventured deep into the Underdark with his companions and solved the conspiracy in the shadows. He had also killed the undead that caused chaos and expelled the evil dragons that occupied the villages. He was an outstanding warrior and also an outstanding ranger. However, he was now a general of the Empire where Earl Mance had brought the expeditionary army of the Empire with him. In front of them was an army of about 20,000 orcs. After Victor Torres' orcs learned about the situation in the central region, he had asked the court to send 20,000 orc warriors to join the Blackwing clan's invasion plan. The enemy is weak, but only the strongest warriors are qualified to be the first to step onto the battlefield, the great chieftain of Gaul said when selecting the warriors. When Earl Mance discovered the orcs also discovered him. They quickly used the carts that were used to transport supplies to set up a camp and prepare for the upcoming battle. At the same time, Mance also used the advantage of the cavalry over the infantry and their advantage in numbers to surround the orcs from 3 sides. The orcs' desire for battle was quite strong. On the second day, they took the initiative to attack their opponents. They advanced at a very fast speed. Although they were fully armed with war hammers and heavy armor, their strong physique allowed them to walk at the speed of the cavalry while maintaining the order of their formation. Just the scene alone was enough to make Earl Mance speechless. When he was still an adventurer, he had heard the news of the Black Dragon removing the curse for the orcs. But it was only now that he knew what these green-skinned pigs, who had been trampled under their feet, could do when they were not suppressed. While the cavalry on both sides were still rushing over, the orcs had already thrown their short spears at the center of Mance's army formation. The next moment, these heavily armored orcs crashed into Mance's charging knights. It was like steel hitting soft mud. These arrogant war horses from the south were torn into a bloody mess. The impact of the orcs' heavy infantry almost immediately caused the vanguard to fall into chaos and struggle. They rushed straight to the middle camp and swarmed in through the gap that had been torn open. Soon, a young orc with brown skin and thick fangs roared happily. He held a head in his hand and ran to the great chieftain's side. "Great chieftain, I've already cut off the head of the enemy leader." Gaul looked at the orc who still looked like a child and smiled. "Well done, Engel, my son." This encounter was a massacre from the beginning. The nobles of the Rising Sun City had no intuitive concept of how fierce the Blackwing Empire was. They thought that their army was Iradia's most elite troops and had far underestimated the fighting strength of those foreign races. This serious misjudgment had brought a terrible nightmare to General Mance and taught the Rising Sun City a lesson in blood. The Blackwing clan's occupation of the central trading city-states had been carried out for less than 8 months. In these 8 months, different news had floated out of the Free Trade Federation. The Blackwing Empire declares war on the Free Trade Federation. The evil beasts are attacking Beyonce. Disaster. The Great Maze Purge. Erin has been occupied. Governor Mudos has surrendered. Welcome Emperor Caesar and the lords of the court to your loyal Prometheus. Chapter 568. The Black Dragon's empire had swallowed up the entire central region. Due to the timely surrender, many local nobles had kept their lives, but without exception, they had all lost their wealth, titles, territories, and armies. Fortunately, the Black Dragon army was disciplined. Although the monsters were rather cruel during the war, there were no plundering or massacres after the victory. As a representative of the lords of the court, Gull, the chief of the orcs, received a letter of surrender from the holy city of Prometheus. It was worth mentioning that the former Federation leader, Tashimu, had fled south from Prometheus with the help of the priests and the high-ranking guards of the unfallen empire. He had also taken many magic books from the great library of Prometheus, the crown, sword, and scepter that symbolized the Federation's power, as well as many magic items. However, this fellow had escaped. The Empire had no intention of pursuing a fugitive leader. After swallowing such a large piece of land, just the civil affairs alone was a very troublesome matter. The lords of the court were busy organizing the newly acquired territory, crushing the local traditions, and moving the Black Dragon's royal authority and law to the central region. At the same time, at the bottom of the northern continent of Iradia, the sleeping Caesar's body burst into a golden light. The overflowing energy was discharged from under the scales, filling the dry and scorching air. It had been 3 years since he had fallen into a deep sleep, but it was only now that he had completed the adjustment of his own power and began to absorb the divine fire of Alexios and the divine crystal of Malor. At first, things went smoothly, but soon, Malor's divine crystal began to spontaneously counterattack. Things that involved the gods were not easy to deal with. Even if it was just a piece of unconscious divine crystal, it had a power that mortals could not understand. If an ordinary legend wanted to touch such a thing, only death would await, and they would be turned into Malor's hunting puppet. The surface of the Black Dragon's body burst into an incandescent light, and the ground beneath his feet melted and decomposed. Meanwhile, black divine power rose from his heart. Caesar's chest had ruptured, or at least that was what it looked like on the surface. The cracks on his chest bloomed with crimson light, and then turned golden. On the other side, a black sphere appeared in front of him, and violent and bloody energy gathered in the black sphere. A pained expression appeared on the Black Dragon's face. He bared his teeth, and light and electricity appeared all over his body due to the overflowing energy. This was especially so for his ruptured chest, which had long become the source of the light, as if it was another mouth bigger than his own. Finally, his entire body was shrouded in waves of golden particles. The black sphere grew steadily, and the golden light burst out. The two sides competed, and the light was distorted. As Caesar's power continued to rise without limit, something terrible happened. The local mountains began to erupt, and huge holes split open at the top of the mountains. Then, red magma burst out hundreds of meters high, and huge pillars of smoke several times the height of the magma. The huge volcanic cloud blocked out the sun, and the area was dark. The only light came from the erupting volcano, and the thunder-like explosions continued without end. Fortunately, the surrounding area was a no-man's land under military control, and the magma from the volcano did not fall into the populated areas. However, it did ignite the surrounding forest, and huge red-hot rocks fell from the sky like meteors, smashing deep holes in the ground. Earthquakes, fire, sulfur gas, and lethal radiation had reached the level of a disaster, forcing the court to take emergency measures and send a large number of spellcasters to the area to control the situation. The violent eruption only lasted for a few hours, but the huge pillars of smoke and clouds could linger for a long time. At this time, the sleeping Caesar had raised his power to the maximum, and the fusion reaction had reached the highest limit. If this continued, his body would melt, and then it would cause an explosion that would affect half the continent. Malor's divinity was suppressed, and the Black Dragon's chest was gradually healing. In the end, it was only a divinity and not a complete god with divine title and divine fire. This level of storm was already the limit it could reach. As the devouring of the divinity increased, Caesar gradually felt the resonance from the astral sea. The astral sea was a collection of the laws of the astral plane and also the source of all energy. Feeling the call of the astral sea meant that Caesar's power had exceeded the boundary of the material plane. Caesar took deep breaths and worked hard to fuse the divine fire and divinity together and then digest them. The whole process took a long time, and during this time, the black dragon continued to feel the power of the astral sea. It was obvious that the outer world was tempting and calling him. Once Caesar was tempted and resonated with the astral sea and resonated with it, his power would immediately rise to a new level, but then he would be expelled by the material plane. These things were not attractive to the black dragon at all. "This doesn't fit my train of thought at all," the sleeping Caesar mumbled, trying hard to block the influence of the astral sea. Caesar's empire was quiet again. The kobolds and enkhegs were recruiting farmers step by step and opening up canals, while the goblins and dwarves were busy researching weapons. Only the central region was not quiet. With the support of external forces, there were many rebellions here. Dragonborn and orc soldiers were constantly arresting people, and those who were powerful in the past were once again wiped out. Large numbers of unstable people were hanged on the gallows in the central square. The countries in the south were quite dissatisfied with this, and they began to take in immigrants from the central region. At the same time, they wantonly declared that the Blackwing Empire was an extremely cruel and cold-blooded country. With the support of the Unfallen Empire, they launched a series of attacks on the central colonies of the Blackwing Empire in the name of saving the people of the Trade Federation and crusading against evil. Time passed. Caesar did not know the time he had spent devouring and digesting the divine spark. It did not sound like a long time, but in reality, almost 20 years had passed in the outside world. Within 20 years, due to the stable living conditions and sufficient food, the population of the Blackwing Empire had increased explosively and had more than doubled. Just the capital where the northern court was located alone had a population of more than 100,000. This was already the standard for the largest city in Iradia, but in the Black Dragon's empire, it was not the most prosperous. The Queen's city, Galanaud, the main city of the orcs, Victoria, the adventurer's city, Blackrock Mountain, and the port on the west coast all had a population greater than that of the capital. Thanks to the Great Voyage, the development of the new continent, and the Industrial Revolution, the entire empire's economy had entered a golden age of rapid development. However, due to the continuous expansion of power, the friction between the Northern Empire and the Unfallen Empire had become more and more serious. Today, these two huge countries had already broken out dozens of wars in their respective colonies. Caesar did not know any of this, because he had just completed the first stage of his slumber and absorbed the trophy in the dark dream. Cataclysm, you have swallowed a god. Choice, please choose the reward land of God, or I am the empire. Chapter 569. Please choose the reward land of God, or I am the empire. Caesar stared at the words that appeared on the trophy in front of him. He twisted his neck, and a big question mark appeared on his head. Before this, Black Dream had never given Caesar a choice. Whether it was bronze, black jade, pure gold, or the higher-grade white diamond, he had never given Caesar the right to choose. However, this time was different. Caesar wanted to choose his own path of improvement. These two choices might be related to the direction of my growth in the future. Black Dragon thought, and his heart became more serious. In the endless darkness, Caesar raised his claws and gently touched the words that appeared in front of the trophy. Land of God, Black Dragon retreated. Not far away, he saw a sand map that he had not paid attention to earlier. This was a panoramic view of the Blackwing Empire. It outlined the empire's capital, fortress, port, and various other areas down to the smallest detail. Now, there was a new panoramic view of the Trade Federation beside it. However, compared to the bright colors of the panoramic view of the empire, the Trade Federation's area was very dark, as if it was shrouded in fog and dark clouds. The choice disappeared, and new words appeared. Smelt the seas got fire and divinity into a brand new divinity. Embark on the path of the dragon of God. Your empire will become your God's kingdom. It will provide you with the most basic godhood and godfire. God's kingdom. Black Dragon's pupils contracted. He had to admit that these words were indeed a little shocking. The ultimate dream that billions of creatures in the astral world yearned for day and night was now displayed right in front of him, and it was just at his fingertips. As long as he grasped the words in front of him, the empire that Caesar had painstakingly built for many years would become a god's domain. All the lords of the royal court, the Black Dragon clan, and the citizens of the empire would raise the god's flame and place him on the throne. Following that, the Black Dragon only needed to be like the gods in the astral plane, managing the god's kingdom step by step, developing believers and collecting faith. He would then be able to continuously become stronger and become a dragon god like Tiamat and Bahamut. As Caesar continued to grow stronger, his power would also feed back into his own god's kingdom. At that time, whether it was Luna, Odin, the lords of the palace, the radiation dragons, the orcs, or even the most ordinary and inferior kobolds, they would all be promoted. This was the biggest benefit of choosing land god's kingdom. Other gods cannot do it. In the early stage of becoming a god, the gods needed to pull their followers into their own god's kingdom step by step. Caesar was tempted. It was not that he could not resist the temptation, but the reward of land god's kingdom was too great. It could satisfy all his fantasies and needs for becoming a god. Under such circumstances, he did not even want to look at the other option in detail. The Black Dragon took a few deep breaths and slowly reached out his claws, preparing to grasp the words in front of him. Caesar suddenly stopped. A simple question appeared in his mind. Previously, for the sake of the deal with Talos, he had flipped through all the information about gods in the Imperial Library. The information showed that the power of gods came from faith and was limited to their divine domain. In other words, divine power could only be used within the divine domain. For example, Talos used the power of storm and destruction. Pyro used the power of the eternal blaze. Mystery used the power of magic and elemental energy, and so on. However, Caesar did not know what divine domain he would obtain in the future. After all, it was something that the astral plane Source C had given him after combining many existing facts and laws. Even Black Dream could not predict it. The Black Dragon did not have many believers, and his power was limited to Iradia. Moreover, the astral plane had been formed for 10 billion years, and the distribution of divine domains had been fixed. The Black Dragon might not be able to obtain a powerful divine domain. It was more likely that he would only become a weak divine dragon god. However, this was not the most important thing. Divine domains could be stolen, and believers could be developed. As long as Caesar had enough patience, he would become stronger sooner or later. What worried him the most was that after obtaining a divine domain, the Source C would cause him to lose the power that did not belong to his divine domain. In that case, would the Black Dream disappear? The Source C was the embodiment of the laws of the entire astral plane. Would the mysterious Black Dream be able to hide from the eyes of the Source C when he obtained a divine domain? Time passed by minute. After a long silence, the Black Dragon finally retracted his claws. He did not dare to gamble. Although he had an inexplicable confidence in Black Dream, he did not have the wishful thinking that this thing that accompanied him in his rebirth could resist the ultimate power of the entire universe. If something went wrong, this would be the last time Black Dream appeared in front of him. Shaking his head, Caesar crossed out the words in front of him and touched another option. I am the Empire. The panoramic view of the Empire disappeared, and a huge statue that was several times bigger than Caesar appeared out of thin air. It floated in the air, and its huge wings extended into the boundless darkness of Black Dream. Compared to it, the Black Dragon's body was like a small stone on the beach. This dragon statue was dark gold in color, but the horns on its head had the distinctive characteristics that belonged only to Caesar. Swallow and digest the divine fire and divine spark that you have seized. Completely isolate the call of the source sea and embark on the path of an ultimate creature. The divine fire and divine spark will be transformed into an antimatter generator and a singularity furnace. Only caring about oneself, and everything else is just dust and ants. This is the meaning of I am the Empire, Caesar whispered to himself. Ultimate creature. What is considered an ultimate creature? Does siren count? Kuingu, Dios, and mad clamor count? After making his decision, Caesar stretched out his claws and crushed the words in front of him. Perhaps this option did not look as impressive as the reward of Land of Gods, and the potential of an ultimate creature's development might not be as great as the Dragon of Gods, but at least it was not risky. Sometimes being conservative was not necessarily a bad thing. The statue disappeared, and the fragments of the words turned into specks of light that sneaked into the trophy. After making his choice, Caesar left Black Dream and fell into a deeper sleep. Almost at the same moment that Caesar made his choice, in the depths of the Black Wing Empire's royal court, Odin, who was happily fiddling with the abominations, suddenly felt a strong sense of dizziness and fell to the ground with a yelp. Ouch, my head hurts. What's going on? Odin held her head and yelled. It was as if something had attacked her brain and appeared in her memory out of thin air. This attack was not detected by the little dragon, and it did not trigger the protective barrier set up by the black dragon. Without a teacher, Odin stretched out her hand, and a pure white ball of light appeared in front of her. It was surrounded by countless chaotic prayers and scriptures, and the power of faith was constantly being transmitted to it. Taking back the treasure stolen by the bandits, finding my lost husband in the desert, protecting me from the pursuit of the ranger. What are these? Odin muttered. It seems like there are suddenly so many things to do. Chapter 570. Caesar once again fell into a 5-year-long slumber. During this period, he would occasionally wake up, but apart from Luna and Odin, no liege of the imperial court came to disturb him. The entire Iradia had entered a strange and cold period of peace. There was basically no large-scale war, and even the people's passion for adventure had lessened. The northern continent no longer had the profession of dragon-slaying warrior. Of course, regional conflicts still happened every day, such as the border conflict between Hajien and the Trade Federation, the mutual surveillance between Blackwing and the Empire of the Unsetting Sun on the high seas, and the unification of the countries of Ersala. It was just that these incidents did not escalate to the level of war. In the past 10 years, the Black Dragon Empire had consolidated its ruling power in the middle of the continent and entered a period of steady development. After removing the military service and political rights of the common people, the lives of the common people were better than those of the other countries on the continent. Now, the Adventurers Guild had been banned in the northern lands, and an official adventurers organization had been formed from the Imperial Knights. Those adventurers and those who did not want to live in the dark would join the Adventurers Guild. After all, it was not a bad thing to spend some money to support these people. They might come in handy when necessary. For a long time, the Black Dragon had been ruling the country with power and force. But after years of hard work by the liege of the imperial court, the country had begun to truly integrate. Communication crystals and teleportation circles that connected the cities across the country, as well as a comprehensive road network, had made the country inseparable. At least now, most of the common people have begun to say that I am a citizen of the Empire, and not a citizen of a certain place or race. Hogg said with a sense of accomplishment. After all, Caesar had always treated it as the imperial seneschal. It had always been in charge of such matters, and now it was only right for it to reap the fruits. Oh, Odin listened absent-mindedly. After entering adolescence, Luna had ordered the little dragon to learn how to handle imperial affairs. It was a pity that Odin was not interested in it all. Compared to sitting on a chair and reviewing reports and documents, she was more willing to fiddle with the little luminous orb in her head to see what new wishes it had. Hope that little Lilith will fall in love with me? How do you want me to do that? Odin tilted its head. What did you say? The Jackal Lord put down the document in his paw and turned to look at her. No. Odin immediately came back to her senses. Her human form was still the same as when she was a child. She shook her head like a rattle drum. Nothing. Time's up, Mr. Hog. I have to go to Mr. Corgi's for another lesson. After saying that, Odin quickly slipped away. That beautiful ball of light was her little secret. She had never told anyone about it, not even Caesar and Luna. Your Majesty, the little princess is nothing like you when you were young. Hog grinned and shook his head with a smile as he watched Odin skipping away. It was one of the earliest followers of Caesar and knew what the Black Emperor was like when he was young. Regardless of whether it was the demon's worm-eaten tunnel or the devil's dusk zone, everything that needed to be done was still progressing. However, in order to achieve their goals, they had to make a lot of preparations beforehand. Even now, the devils were still collecting materials and constructing teleportation formations. It would take at least 10 years before the Irene's Queen Glagia would be able to send the first batch of devils to the material planes. As for the demons, they needed even more time. They were still working hard to open up the tunnel day after day. The long hours of labor caused many of them to become angry and quit. Even the Lords of the Abyss had different opinions, but none of them could stop the tunnel from being opened up. Those who are useless will die. This was the supreme will of the three abyssal pillar gods when they discovered that the progress was slowing down. The demon army began to sweep through the tunnels again and again. I receive your message. Well done, Asliers. Graz, ZT nodded at the Balrog outside the mirror image. I will pay attention to the devil's movements. No one can stop us. Wait. Asliers hurriedly called out when he saw that the communication was about to be cut off. Is there anything else? Graz ZT was displeased at being interrupted. Great Dark Lord. For the first time, the Fire Devil King showed signs of hesitation. It deliberated for a moment before speaking in a probing tone. You know that it takes a long time to excavate the worm-eroded tunnel in Aladia. There are so many material planes in the astral plane, and there are many nearby areas for us to choose from. Why must we land here? Graz ZT took a long look at the Balrog, his pitch-black eyes sending chills down one spine. After a pause, the Abyssal King said, What are you thinking about? Asliers. I just can't control my curiosity, Great Dark Lord. The Balrog knelt down and explained. Remove this heart. All you need to know is that we have to take down Iradia's material plane. That's enough. Graz ZT cut off the communication, explaining so much to an elemental lord. This isn't like the you I know, Lord of the Dark Cloud. It was then that the figure beside Graz ZT slowly revealed its true appearance. It was a huge demon that was 3 times the height of an ordinary demon. It was fat and strong, with huge spiral goat horns on its head. Its hooves were covered in thick brown fur, and it wielded a sinister skull wand in its strong arms. Black bat-like wings extended from its back, and a long snake-like tail with a sharp hook trailed behind it. The undead King Orcus was an abyss lord on par with the Lord of the Dark Cloud, Graz. It was said that he was the one who created the first undead creature in the astral plane. He put down his wand and reached out to grab the Lord of the Dark Cloud's shoulder, but was pushed away in disgust. I don't have time to chat with you. Tell me the situation at the bottom. The demon Prince Demogorgon had also arrived. His appearance was that of a ferocious 2-headed gorilla. For hundreds of thousands of years, the 3 pillar gods of the abyss had maintained a state of hostility. The demon lords and commanders under them were constantly at war, but this time they were all gathered in Graz ZT's Silver Palace. Presumably, even the king of gods with great divine powers would be deeply worried about this kind of meeting. Graz ZT frowned and said bluntly, The situation is not optimistic. Not only did the shadow not disappear, it is slowly forming. Someone in this world is calling out to them. Just like last time, the undead king nodded. They cannot be killed. They will only fall into a deep slumber and then awaken. I thought it was pure nonsense. I didn't expect it to be true. You still remember something that happened hundreds of millions of years ago. The demon prince smiled. Seems like you have a deep impression of it. Of course. Orcus smiled back, but there was a hint of mockery in his smile. He glanced at Graz. The one standing here back then wasn't him. After that, the two of them seemed to have found a common topic. They smiled but did not say anything. No one knew what they were talking about in their minds. Graz-et was not annoyed by this. He just said to himself, although there are no ravings yet, they will appear at the bottom of the abyss if this continues. Back then, only Io could expel those things. What can we do? The undead king still looked indifferent. It seems like the abyss will be finished sooner or later. That is why we need to land on Iradia as soon as possible. The demon prince regained his composure and said seriously, due to the birth of a powerful entity, that material plane does not have much time left. It will soon be reduced to a part of the astral plane. When that happens, all life forms on Iradia will be thrown into the astral plane. That will be our chance to leave. How is the progress of the worm-eroded passage? Graz-et asked. At least 50 more years, the demon prince said. Faster. I will keep watch at the bottom. You guys go and monitor the progress there. This is already the fastest we can go. If we want to go faster, we will have to do it ourselves. Then go by yourself. Bastard, why don't you go? Energy exploded, and all the demons on this floor fell silent. The three pillar gods of the abyss began to fight in the Silver Palace. Chapter 571. Caesar fell from the sky and landed on the hard steel ground amidst the flying sand and stones. In the distance, the giant golden wheel that looked like a Ferris wheel occupied half of the sky. It floated in the air and rotated slowly. It was faintly discernible in the clouds. It seemed to be very far away, and no rumbling could be heard. There was a faint, unknown sour smell in the air. Black Dragon frowned and turned his body. If there was no confusion in his consciousness, he should still be in a deep sleep. His body should be undergoing a new phase of amplification and adjustment after choosing, I am the Empire. His soul should also be in an unconscious state, waiting for the end of his deep sleep to wake up naturally. How could he suddenly appear in this place? What was going on with this scene in front of him? Caesar held his breath and looked out along the ground. His psionic energy and perception spread out in all directions. But before he could discover anything, the space suddenly shook. The steel ground under his feet and the giant golden wheel in the distance collapsed in an instant. They shattered into pieces like a mirror and were swallowed up by the deep darkness. Then, the black dragon felt the world spin and churn violently. A strong gravitational force surged from the bottom and dragged him down continuously. But in this situation, the black dragon calmed down and was not as vigilant and lost as before. This was because in this short period of time, he had already noticed some clues and smelled a familiar scent. He knew that his body was still sleeping in the underground cave in the northern mountains. His consciousness and soul were also safe and sound, and there was no abnormality. This was the Black Dream. Caesar was clearly aware that he was in the Black Dream space, but he didn't know why this place would suddenly change appearance. When this thing appeared, there were no books or guides to guide it. The Black Dragon also only had a smattering of knowledge about it. Even now, it was still trying to figure it out. Caesar didn't have a clue about the sudden change in the Black Dream, and could only quietly wait and watch. The Black Dragon continued to fall under the influence of gravity. In the process, Caesar saw huge corpses of different shapes and sizes. They were all astral world creatures, and their bodies were comparable to planets. They were lying in the endless dark space. In the meantime, the change in gravity forced him to roll abruptly, knocking into some floating debris of meteorites. At the same time, he also saw some withered material planes. They were dilapidated and blurry, covered by darkness. He didn't know if this was an illusion created by Black Dream, or if these things really existed in the star plane. After an immeasurable amount of time, the powerful dragging sensation suddenly disappeared. Caesar had finally reached the finish line. This fellow had maintained his condition quite well. The illusions in the Black Dragon's dream were very realistic. There was a dull pain from the impact of the meteors, but it was not enough to shatter the Black Dragon's armor. Instead, there were a few times when the gravitational force tore at him midway, causing him to feel a little uncomfortable and sore in his muscles. Caesar's pupils moved as he sized up the situation around him. He wanted to know what Black Dream was going to show him. This was a vast and empty land. Even with Caesar's eyesight, he couldn't see the end of it. It was deathly still, quiet, and devoid of life. The ground was dark red, and there was no end to it. There was no boundary wall at the top. He could see many floating meteorites above him. Some were incomparably huge, surpassing the mountains, and some were very ordinary, not even as big as a fireplace. From low altitude to the end of the sky, there were countless of them. This place was like an isolated island floating in the star plane that no one cared about. Can't I leave? He tried for a while and found that he couldn't leave Black Dream for the time being. He didn't panic. Caesar moved his limbs casually and wandered around the land. He wanted to see if there was any life in this place, but in the end, he didn't find anything. The dark red land was deathly still like a tomb. Even the flow of air was very slow and sluggish. The black dragon circled around for a while before flapping its wings and flying high up into the sky. He gazed into the distance as far as he could to see the whole picture of this place. Then he made a new discovery. In a certain direction, there was a faint light at the end of the horizon. Caesar pondered for a moment, and then increased his speed as he flew forward. Rumble. This fellow's speed was very fast. When it swept past at a low altitude, it would bring about loud noises and turbulence. It was like an extra-large, supersonic fighter jet, able to cross hundreds of miles in the blink of an eye. Along the way, Caesar found that the ground below was an unchanging dark red. Even vegetation couldn't be seen. In front of him, the light gradually became more and more brilliant as it rushed into the sky. After flying for a while, Caesar saw something in front of him. It was the giant golden wheel that he had seen before. It appeared in front of his eyes again. It was huge and ancient, and its whole body was dazzling. It slowly rotated, and the light rushed into the sky, releasing a rich energy. Almost at the next moment, when the black dragon saw this scene, the tentacles shook the ground. The dark purple tentacles that were full of suction cups rose from the cracks in the ground one after another, stirring up the soil under their feet. They quickly wrapped around the giant golden wheel, slowing it down and stopping it. The suction cups on the tentacles sucked, and in a few minutes, the dazzling giant will quickly dimmed. Caesar's pupils shrank, and he subconsciously stepped back. He felt a sense of familiarity with these twisted and abominable tentacles, as if he had seen them somewhere before. The giant golden wheel was tilting and collapsing. It was not until the giant wheel's light completely disappeared that the tentacles around it were willing to let go, reluctantly retreating. Then, they seemed to have noticed Caesar's gaze, as if they had found new prey. They excitedly flapped and twisted, and their roots broke through the rock and soil as they rushed over. At the same time, a chaotic murmur came from all directions. The voice was not in the common language or any language that Caesar could understand. Even the vocal organs of ordinary creatures could not produce such a strange tone, but it went straight to Caesar's heart, letting him understand the meaning of the murmur out of thin air. "Wake up, return to my body, become a part of me. What is this?" Caesar suddenly raised his head, and the sky suddenly darkened. The vast sky that was originally filled with meteors was now occupied by a huge bloodshot eye. They were all staring in the same direction, staring at the black dragon below. Even someone as determined as Caesar was shocked by this situation. The black dragon's roar shook the wilderness. It was the roar of the black dragon to hide his uneasiness. Asterisk rumble. Asterisk the earth trembled, and a tentacle dozens of meters long suddenly broke out of the ground. Caesar subconsciously dodged to the side, but he was still one step too late because he was not paying attention. The tentacle was as fast as lightning, and the tip of the tentacle was like a spiral knife. It easily pierced through Caesar's right wing, nailing him in the air. This is not an illusion. Excruciating pain came. Caesar was shocked to find that his soul was really injured. The suckers on the surface of the twisted and disgusting tentacle were sucking, and the psionic energy in his body suddenly boiled, gushing out of the wound like a flood. At the same time, the black dragon, who was sleeping at the bottom of the mountain range north of Iradia, showed a painful expression on his face. A huge burning hole suddenly appeared on his folded right wing, and blood gushed out. Chi! A low groan came from afar, as if laughing. More tentacles stretched out from the ground and attacked the black dragon. A terrifying thought appeared in Caesar's mind. He suddenly realized that if he did not fight and get rid of the trouble in front of him, he might really die. He would be devoured and digested, and his body that was sleeping in the north might never wake up again. There was no time to think about the cause and effect. Caesar broke free from the tentacle on his right wing and burst out with all his strength. Singularity furnace load. Antimatter generator load. Chapter 572. Singularity furnace load. Antimatter generator load. The black dragon ignored the worsening of his injuries and forcefully twisted his body to break free from the tentacles. He pulled away from the continuous whistling attacks and flapped his wings to land in the distance. He landed on all fours, retracted his sharp claws, and lowered his body. Majestic power brewed and twisted in Caesar's body, and amazing changes gradually took place. The dragon's body emitted an unparalleled, blazing light. This light was not the light that bloomed when a god descended. It was more like a kind of wave that overflowed from the surface of Caesar's body. Waves, and intermittently surged outwards. Chi, the unknown creature, let out the same low groan as before, still expressing emotions similar to ridicule and ridicule. It was indifferent to Caesar's changes. As the sound fell, the ground immediately turned over, and the twisted purple tentacles arrived in an instant. Roar! The black dragon shook the ground, and the already devastated surface was torn apart by the dragon's great strength. He flapped his wings and rose into the air, wanting to see the full appearance of the creature that attacked him. The scene that entered his eyes was even more chilling. It was densely packed tentacles covered in mucus, with spikes and suction cups. They were circling and wriggling together, like a group of snakes in a snake's nest. Caesar did not see the opponent's body. The shattered surface was full of such a scene. It was as if the black dragon was not stepping on the ground, but a dirty shell formed by the dust on the surface of the opponent's body over a long period of time. What is this? This was the first thought that came to Caesar's mind. The dragon's movements in the battle stiffened, and a terrible feeling of horror gripped his heart tightly like an invisible claw. A chill spread from his back to the tip of his tail. Wake up, return to my body, and become a part of me. I will bring you to experience the real world. The monster seemed to have begun to speak. More murmurs and strange sounds poured into Caesar's mind. The pupils of the bloodshot eyes in the sky widened, and the distance between them and the ground was closed silently. Some distorted colors and chaotic and blurry pictures suddenly broke into Caesar's vision. He saw some indescribable deformed creatures, shining stars, and a light gate in the depths of the star abyss. A huge amount of information poured out like a torrent, uncontrollably crashing into Caesar's brain. An even bigger and more terrifying reality burned his soul like a fire. The black dragon trembled, and his golden eyes had turned red, exuding disbelief and fear. His rationality collapsed, and his mind was traumatized. Outer God, in the chaotic process of losing his rationality, a word that belonged to his previous life that he had not heard for a long time flashed across Caesar's mind. He suddenly shuddered and widened his eyes as if he had grasped at a life-saving straw. He suddenly understood the indescribable and incomparable creature in front of him. Outer God! Outer God! Outer God! Whoosh! The distorted pictures faded and disappeared, and the strange murmurs quickly faded away. When Caesar defined the creature in front of him, All the confusion and chaos left the black dragon's body like a receding tide, leaving only the weakness of using all his strength and surviving a disaster. Of course, using all his strength to survive a disaster brought not only weakness, but also anger. The black dragon gasped and growled in a low voice. "You actually want to defeat me in my dream?" Bloom. Caesar opened his mouth. In the center of the singularity furnace in his body, a large number of particles were created by energy conversion in an instant. They burned and accelerated under the pressure of the singularity furnace. Finally, they lost control and exploded. What happened next was difficult to describe with words. To put it simply, light drowned everything, and the entire world was enveloped in an intense white light. The ground rumbled, but the sound soon disappeared because the high temperature was melting everything that was tangible. In just a few dozen seconds, Caesar released all the energy that a low-level god could burst out by burning his divinity. Not only that, after the explosion, even if Caesar left, the disaster he created would not disappear immediately. These terrible energy storms and high temperatures would wreak havoc for decades, or even centuries, gradually diminishing and disappearing over a long period of time. Back in front of Caesar, the furious black dragon created a destructive blow. He himself also turned into a light source, shrouded in a shining wave of golden particles, and his body could not be seen clearly. In front of him, the continuous land, the disgusting tentacles, and the terrible eyeballs all disappeared, but the outer god did not die. It appeared in the image of an ugly and bloated heart in front of Caesar, covered in a dark purple shield. There was an unclear murmur. The impatient black dragon opened his mouth again. Annihilation. This time, there were no fancy particles or strong light. Although Caesar opened his mouth wide, from the outside, he just took a deep breath. Then, he exhaled again. These gases reached the shield of the outer god's projection, and at the moment of contact, they turned into the same color as the purple shield. Then, they annihilated each other, and a large amount of energy burst out from the explosion. The annihilation was silent, and so was the explosion. This was because they brought about a localized, small-scale spatial collapse. Energy and matter were thrown into the chaotic dimension, and in silence, the shield created by the outer god's projection disappeared, and even the projection itself was being annihilated. The external appearance of this annihilation was very scary. It did not create the visual effect of tearing and cutting, nor was it the visual effect of crushing and crushing. Instead, it was erasing. It was like using an eraser to erase a pencil drawing, directly wiping the target clean, but the surrounding environment was still intact, as if nothing had happened. The sleeping black dragon suddenly opened his eyes, then took a deep breath, supported his body with all four limbs, shook his head, and twisted his neck to look around. "Sure enough, my body is still sleeping here," Caesar muttered. Was that the illusion in the black dream? Let me challenge an indescribable fellow in my sleep. At this moment, a sore and itchy feeling came from his right wing. Because his neck was short, Caesar could not stretch his head to look at his wing like other true dragons. He could only pull his wing over and twist his neck to look. Although the wound had healed with his powerful self-healing ability, Caesar could clearly see that there were traces of a hole in his right wing. The sore and itchy feeling from this area also told him that his judgment was correct. Most importantly, in the area around the wound, Caesar saw a small circle of ugly and twisted bruised purple granulation, as if it had grown out of his body. This discovery made him shudder. It seems that it has been eroded. If I were completely lost, I don't know what would happen to me. Gee! Caesar heard the murmur again, as if laughing. Under his gaze, the bruised purple granulation slowly wriggled and gathered, turning into the shape of an eyeball and attached to the inner side of his right wing. Chapter 573. In a magnificent golden palace, Odin Tangerine sat on a hard throne. Above his head were flowing starlight and divine light. Giant dragons flapped their wings and swam around the palace, stirring up strong winds. Looking down from the throne, he could see more than half of the city clearly. All kinds of buildings and markets spread out in all directions with this floating palace as the center. There was no end in sight. "I will consider it." Odin nodded. The slender fingers of his left hand on the throne moved. "You may leave." The messenger with the national seal of Ersala on his shoulder bowed. He lowered his head and respectfully retreated until he reached the threshold. He bowed again before he dared to turn around and walk down the steps. Finally, he rode the hippogriff and left the floating palace. What the hell? After the messenger left, Odin quickly took off the golden boots on his feet and found a comfortable position to lie on the throne. What's the point of pretending? When you meet the messenger, your every word and action represents the dignity of the royal family. Moreover, you are now the faith of the Holy See, the leader of the royal court, and the ruler of the empire. You should have an inviolable dignity. The big eyeball slowly floated out from the shadows. Its tone was respectful, but not less strict. "This is also the queen's request for you. But I don't want to do these things at all." Odin held his head in pain. "I just want to be a useless dragon. I want to eat and sleep every day. When I'm in a good mood, I will fulfill the 2 wishes in the divine light. When I'm in a bad mood, I will beat up Khan. That's not good." The child of the poison fire prince also has the name Tangerine. "You can't, I know. Odin curled his lips. "It's just a joke." Eyeball Corgi waved its tentacles and motioned for the Draconid maids on both sides to pick up the princess boots. It stared at them as they helped Odin put them on. "You still have to meet the ambassador of the Deep Sea Kingdom later." Odin reluctantly stretched out her legs, and the maids skillfully helped her get dressed. A few more maids came and stood behind her, ready to help her tidy up her hair. When everything was ready, Odin felt as if she was shackled again. Everything around her became unpleasant to the eye. At this time, she just wanted to lie on a soft bed and eat the roasted lamb leg with ice summer dew. Just as she thought of this, the big eyeball stretched out its tentacle and handed something over. It was a round metal can. "The emissary won't be here for a while. You can drink some first, but you can't eat the leg of lamb now," Corgi said. "Teacher, you actually used mind peeking on me?" Odin said with his eyes wide open in disbelief. He took the metal can, unscrewed the lid, and poured a mouthful of hot water into his mouth. "Oh, it's delicious. The queen once told me about your hobbies and ambitions." There was a faint smile in Corgi's voice. Of course, His Majesty also said something a long time ago. For example, you once went to his ranch to steal? Okay, don't say any more. Odin hurriedly sat up straight and said in a serious tone, "The fewer people who know about this, the better. Actually, this time I'm here to ask for permission to go to the trading city," Corgi said after a moment of silence. Odin was surprised. The trading city is guarded by the lords of the court in turn. Yes, but after so many years, Gaul and the others have been there more than once. It should be my turn to go. Besides, the situation now is not optimistic, and the South needs the reinforcement of magic power. Corgi said, "Your Highness, now that your power is far beyond mine, I have nothing to teach you." Odin was stunned for a few seconds and felt a little disappointed. She definitely did not like Corgi. Most of the time, she even felt that this guy was annoying, always watching her every word and action. When she was young, he always forced her to learn all kinds of nonsense. Odin had asked her mother more than once to get rid of this guy. But one day when she realized that she really did not need a teacher anymore, she could not help but feel a little empty in her heart. After a pause, Odin composed herself and nodded in approval of the request. "If this is the result of the council's discussion, then go." Looking at the sky outside the palace, she continued, "Speaking of which, I've never been to the South, and I'd like to see it. There will be a chance. When His Majesty wakes up, you can take off this heavy responsibility and do what you want for a long time," Corgi said. "Father has never slept for so long. Will something happen?" Odin was a little worried. "The Dragonmaw clan stationed there reported that the barrier is still stable," Corgi said. "Back then, Caesar's energy went berserk in order to smelt the divine fire and divine spark, causing an unprecedented catastrophe. At the same time, The boiling energy also broke through the spatial wall and formed a dimensional fault. Many years ago, the place where Emperor Black Dragon slept had been separated from the Iradia continent, leaving only a barrier similar to a spatial node in that area. Damn barrier, Odin could not help but say. The barrier was so strong that even she could not break it by force. The formation of the barrier should not be His Majesty's intention, but a protective measure made by the will of the plane to maintain stability. After all, the sleeping King Blackwing's energy disturbance is enough to destroy a kingdom. As the Eye of God, Corgi had a lot of knowledge that was difficult for mortals to understand. If it wasn't for the native species, His Majesty would have been expelled long ago. Mother is very worried. She mentioned to me more than once that she wants to build a small house there to stay. Odin muttered. And if she continues to sleep like this, even little mother will be old. Belonia is here. Corgi changed the topic. It was better not to interrupt. Belonia Tangerine, the daughter of Poison Fire Prince Garen and Blakija. She learned her name from Odin and removed the initial characters, keeping only her first name and surname. This was Blakija's idea. She claimed that this was to continue the tradition of the Tangerine family. Her other child with Garen, Khan, was the same. Khan Tangerine. At this time, Odin was looking at Belonia, who was rolling on the ground and acting cute with a headache. Belonia, you're also a young dragon. How can you roll on the ground shamelessly? You're not a little guy anymore. However, Belonia turned a deaf ear to this. Her human form was a chubby little girl who was about 5 or 6 years old. At this moment, she was lying on her stomach and rolling in front of Odin. I don't care, I want it. But I'm not in charge of the printing cards at all. Odin looked at her helplessly. At the same time, he gritted his teeth. Speaking of which, he was only 10 years older than Belonia. Logically speaking, he should be at the age where he could roll around shamelessly. Why was he sitting on a throne now? Forget it. Odin sighed. He took out a stack of cards from his dimensional pouch and carefully handed it to Belonia. These are the cards I've collected. Take them and play with them. Don't lose them. After comforting Belonia and sending her away, Odin suddenly frowned. For the first time, he put on a serious expression and looked at the emblem that only he could see. Then he slowly pulled out a glowing sphere with a slightly different color. This is the divine power from the elegy card. It seems that with this alone, one can achieve a divine position and create a god. Chapter 574. Now, the citizens of the kingdom had almost forgotten about the fact that there were still undead hidden in the thick and hard underground cavern beneath the city. There were very few people who knew about this, and most of them were the upper echelons of the Blackwing clan. Back then, when Caesar unified the countries in the north, he adopted a tough and strict policy of oppression. He spread the Blackwing clan to various parts of the north to increase his control. At the same time, the undead, as a powerful clan under the Black Emperor, also spread throughout the north. Angramo, the skeletal dragon with the name Tangerine, could be called the ultimate nightmare in the hearts of the northerners. It was even more frightening than the Black Emperor on the throne. However, as time passed and the situation changed, after the initial period of terror, their ruler, screaming nightmare Angramo Tangerine, was transferred to the coastal waters. The undead also gradually disappeared without a trace, disappearing from the sight of the people. However, this did not mean that Caesar had given up on this army. After Angramo left, the undead were taken over by the Lich Lord Ren of the royal court. This fellow rarely showed himself and basically stayed in his own cold domain. With his restrictions, the undead and skeletons naturally did not climb to the surface to scare the citizens of the city. Even so, the influence of the undead and the existence of negative energy continued to appear. In the sewage rivers, cemeteries, and places where gallows were erected, the corpses that were exposed to the wild and pecked by vultures and crows would wake up suddenly. They would either writhe on the ropes and roar, or struggle to crawl in the shadows. After the initial period of weakness, they would pounce on fresh meat. Due to the difference in the strength of the negative energy, the undead awakened by the mutation were of different types. The lowest level were the skeletons and zombies that were commonly seen in the continent. The combat power they could produce could be counted with one's fingers. In a situation where they were alone, they were useless other than scaring the women and children. In a new edition of the Illustrated Book of Creatures compiled by the Blackwing Empire, these undead were not even included in the list. What was left were the fellows that were worth mentioning. In areas rich in negative energy, some of the corpses mutated into Boda corpses with flat faces and powdery hard skin. Some became demon soul corpses with claws growing out from the back of their heads. There are also some fellows that were gifted. After absorbing enough negative energy, they could directly mutate into middle-ranked undead, becoming hunting corpses with strange hind legs and tail spikes. However, the continuous mutation of the undead didn't affect the stability and harmony of the Empire at all. Chapter 575. As night fell, Caesar finally arrived at the first stop of his journey, Galenoud. He then easily entered the city as a dragonoid and looked around. To the north was the industrial area where workshops and warehouses gathered, and to the south was the brightly lit market where the commercial area intersected. The east gate of the city happened to be at the intersection of the industrial and commercial areas. Caesar thought for a while and turned left, following the crowd into the market. It was close to July, the middle of summer. The north, with its unique climate characteristics, was unbearably hot. Fortunately, the sun had now disappeared, and the evening was cooler. The streets gradually became lively. The charming shopkeeper stood at the door and greeted her acquaintances. The fishmongers and fruit vendors set up their stalls on the street. The aroma of food, the stench of sewage, and other smells mixed together to form the unique liveliness of the market. Come, 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 fragrant and fresh oyster soup. Drink a bowl tonight and have a good night's sleep. Crispy muffins, iced ginger beer, and summer dew. Gold just dug up by the goblins outside the city. Authentic. Gladiators of Victor Tori. The last two. A free female slave if you buy them. Most of the vendors who sold slaves and treasures had their own stalls. The street vendors who sold fruits and cooked food were shouting loudly, shuttling through the crowd, and greeting the passers-by who were in a hurry. There were humans, orcs, and even powerful demonic hounds and half-dragons. However, the street vendors were not afraid at all and still went up to them enthusiastically to promote. Luna should like to shop in this kind of place. Caesar raised his head slightly and took a deep breath. He was in a good mood. Speaking of which, this kind of life where he mingled with the crowd and the market was rare for him. Most of the time, he maintained the habits of a dragon and lived alone. Although he had personally created this mixed-race empire, he rarely immersed himself in it. Taking the time to walk through the crowded streets of the market was one of the few leisure times he could enjoy. As he walked forward, the density of the crowd slowly increased. Caesar was walking towards the center of the market. Along the street, many wandering harpsmen and bards were playing. The melody was sometimes sad and sometimes melodious. Some of the musicians were surrounded by many children. They listened to the music and instinctively twisted their bodies to the beat, performing their own dance. Whether it was the current empire or the former northern kingdoms, people had the tradition of holding bonfire parties. At that time, people would eat, drink, and dance around the bonfire. It was one of the few entertainment activities in this era. The adults would choose the time and place, but the children would not. Strange. Caesar was a little puzzled. Why don't I see any adventurers? In Iradia, adventurers and mercenaries were always one of the most popular professions. No matter in which country, adventurers could be easily seen. They wandered between humans and other races, searching for treasures, slaying evil dragons, and creating countless beautiful epic chapters. However, Caesar forgot that before he went into hibernation, he ordered the banning of the profession of adventurers. Those who were full of energy and only knew how to cause trouble were all incorporated into the empire's mercenary corps. Hogg did his best to implement this order. Now, wild adventurers in the Northern Empire were very rare. Just as Caesar was thinking, two children in ragged clothes with sallow faces due to malnutrition walked past him and took his money pouch. They acted realistically, skillfully, and moved quickly. It seemed that they were not starving children forced by life, but well-trained professional thieves. Caesar glanced at the two children, who quickly disappeared into the corner of the street, and did not stop them. If it were other dragons who had their gold coins stolen, they would definitely be furious and transform on the spot, roaring and breathing. But for the black dragon, money was just a number that had no concept. Although he also liked these shiny things, he was not as crazy as the other dragons. He continued to walk forward, only treating this as a small interlude in his journey and not taking it to heart. After all, there were too many money pouches with dozens of gold coins in them to count in his psionic space. After taking a few steps, he heard a small commotion in the street behind him. For guards wearing steel armor with knight swords at their waists caught up with him. They were holding the two thieves who had escaped earlier as if they were little chicks. "How dare you steal property in public? You stinking bugs, do you not care about the Empire's laws at all?" The leader of the guards stopped and signaled the guards behind him to throw the two children on the ground. Then he leaned slightly to Caesar and said, "Lord Dragon, we have been arresting these unscrupulous thieves. According to their confession, this is your money pouch." With that, the leader of the guards handed over the money pouch that Caesar had stolen. Caesar did not expect that there would be a follow-up. He was successfully attracted. He borrowed the money, did not count it, and asked directly, "How do you plan to deal with these criminals?" "First, throw them into the dungeon, then interrogate them in the dungeon. Finally, according to what they have done, execute them," Caesar said expressionlessly. "If after interrogation they have indeed committed unforgivable crimes, we will, I said now, kill them." Caesar's tone became firm. "I'm afraid not now. We have no right to," the leader of the guards explained. He had no choice but to explain. This person in front of him was not an ordinary draconid. He had many characteristics of the direct descendant of the Black King. There was a high chance that he came from a special clan. There was a chance that he was a real dragon. "Do you want me to do it myself?" Caesar took a step forward and opened his clawed hands. The surrounding crowd immediately retreated far away. "Lord Dragon, according to the law, no one has the right to take the life of another Empire's citizen, even if he is guilty." The leader of the guards lowered his head even more, but did not move away. "If you do this, Governor Magosos will not be happy. His Highness Odin will not want to see this scene." The two guards behind him also took 2 steps forward and blocked the children, at the same time silently reaching out to grab the hilts of their swords. At this time, another guard who looked slightly older suddenly moved. He turned around and kicked the 2 thieves each, cursing as he pressed their heads to face Caesar. "Hurry up and beg for mercy. Beg for Lord Dragon's forgiveness." The 2 children trembled and choked with sobs. "My lord, please forgive us. We won't do it again. We won't do it again. His Highness Odin." Caesar ignored them and grinned at the leader of the guards, baring his fangs and releasing some of the majesty of a dragon. "It is His Highness Odin who ordered me to patrol Galanoud. Soldiers, listen to my orders. Execute these 2 criminals immediately." "My apologies, my lord." The leader of the guards pursed his lips. He felt his legs go weak again, but there was no reason to retreat now that he had come this far. He was determined to fight to the death and deal with the blame later. He still maintained his motionless posture. "Unless you can prove your identity, we still cannot carry out the order." Caesar looked at him for a moment and suddenly withdrew his aura. "You are not bad." With that said, he brushed past the leader of the guards and left directly. "Throw them into the dungeon." The leader of the guards watched the Dragonborn's back as he left. Only then did he let out the breath he had been holding, wipe his sweat, and ordered his companions to take the 2 child thieves away. Chapter 576. I've heard humans say that courage and stupidity are often only one step away. Margoso sat on a chair and looked down at the guard kneeling on one knee. Soldier, would you say that your courage is commendable or stupidity beyond compare? My lord. The guard captain who had stopped Caesar before lowered his head and said hesitantly, that fellow didn't seem to care. After confirming our resolute attitude, he quickly turned and left. Of course, he wouldn't bother with you fools. The person on the chair sighed. As a blue dragon with a strict hierarchy among the Penishade dragons, Magosos had political wisdom that other dragons could not reach. He was also very good at making connections. You don't even know what that person means. If he's not lying, then he's a special envoy sent by the royal court. Margoso stood up and stared at the two Sphinx stone statues guarding the door, revealing an anxiety that did not match his identity. Him turning and leaving isn't the solution to the problem, but the beginning of it. Next, as long as he reports this matter to his superiors, what do you think the court liege and His Highness Odin would think? They would definitely not consider the problem of you few soldiers. What they would consider is whether the court's orders and will could no longer affect Galanaud. Is Galanaud no longer a part of the empire, but another organization that stands against the court? Margosos said with unusual solemnity. Next should be a complete lockdown. In an hour, the court will hold a war council, and the Blackwing clan and armored forces from the western coast and victory will quickly arrive. A court liege will be the commander, assisted by 4 to 5 legendary leaders. In less than a day, my head will be placed before His Highness Odin. It's that serious? The guard's heart trembled and he shuddered. He had never imagined that his momentary rash advance would cause such grave consequences. Now, he recalled the words are not bad, the Draconid had said before he left. Now, it sounded like there was a deeper meaning. If things were to develop as the Viceroy had said, it would undoubtedly be a terrible disaster for Galanaud. But why was the Viceroy so familiar? He did not seem to hesitate or think when he said those words. His tone was completely certain, as if he had rehearsed it dozens of times in his mind. At that thought, the guard looked up and stole a glance at Margosos. Then, Lord Viceroy, what should we do now? He asked tentatively. What else can we do? Margosos glared at him and said unhappily, hurry up and find him and explain things clearly. If we can't find him, I'll use all of you guys. Hearing this, the guard actually heaved a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that the governor would glare at him and say, what else can we do? We can only carry out the plan in advance. He would transform into a giant dragon and roar, soldiers, listen to my orders. We will eventually become kings. Then, he would raise his flag high and embark on the path of rebellion against the royal court. Fortunately, it's fine as long as that person. It was late at night, and the usually lively tavern had quieted down. Only 1 or 2 drunkards were left lying on the tables. In the frame at the entrance of the tavern, there were dozens of masks of various shapes and sizes. Most of the drunkards were also wearing these masks. It seemed that this was the rule of the tavern. Caesar felt that it was interesting. He casually took off a relatively large mask and put it on before stepping into the tavern. Actually, it was fine if he did not wear it. After all, humans had no ability to differentiate between different races. Just by looking at the face, humans would not be able to differentiate between 2 male orcs. Similarly, orcs would not be able to tell the difference between a draconian and another draconian. They might even mix up 2 draconian of different genders. No one greeted him, and there was no one at the bar. This scene disappointed Caesar. He wanted to sit down and find a few guys to play a few rounds of cards. He wanted to see if the elegy card had become popular 50 years later, or how far it had evolved. Forget it. I'll order a drink and see if the dwarves have come up with anything new apart from the summer dew. Black Dragon thought as he knocked on the bar table. Hey, I'm sorry. Sorry I fell asleep. I didn't expect a new guest to come at this time. It was only then that someone came to greet him. The waiter lifted the curtain and came out from inside. He apologized as he picked up a wooden cup and poured wine from the barrel. It's my fault for neglecting the guest. This cup is on the house. Caesar frowned. He sat down and looked at the waiter in front of him. The waiter was wearing a special mask. The whole mask was divided into two colors, black and white by a vertical line in the middle. The left side of the mask was grinning, revealing a smiling and joyful eye, while the right side of the mask was crying and closed tightly, revealing a pitiful expression. A psychological discomfort came to his mind. Caesar finally knew why the tavern was so deserted. He did not know what the tavern owner was thinking, letting the waiter wear such a disgusting mask. Judging from the guest appearance, you seem to have just arrived at Galanaud not long ago. As if feeling a little embarrassed to let Caesar drink here, the waiter began to take the initiative to strike up a conversation. His voice sounded very young, and although he used a humble and respectful tone, there was always a sense of frivolity. Sort of. How do you know? Caesar took a sip. The taste of the wine was a little astringent. In our local area, lords of status like you generally don't come to West Street. The waiter let out two chuckles and motioned Caesar to look at the drunk on the table. We serve these poor souls. You find this inferior wine not to your taste, but for them, it's just right for them to get drunk without spending too much money. This country is already very good. It's safe, orderly, and allows people of different races to live together and maintain stability. But no matter what era, there will always be people at the bottom who will be stepped on by others. It just so happens that in this era, we are the ones being stepped on. You seem to be very dissatisfied, Caesar said. It's not that I'm dissatisfied. I'm just venting my emotions. Although he said that, the waiter's voice still carried a smile. You know, people like us who live a bitter life are the easiest to have emotions. I'm sorry to make you feel uncomfortable. It's mainly because two friends just offended some big shot and were actually taken away by the guards and thrown into the dungeon without any reason. It seems that they may not be able to get out for the rest of their lives. The waiter stood up and bowed to Caesar in apology. Thinking of this, I'm really sad and can't suppress my emotions. Sob, sob, sob. As he spoke, he actually raised his head, held the eyes on a mask with one hand, and cried. This guy, from the beginning, had exuded an annoying aura, and now it was getting stronger and stronger. Caesar was curious and suddenly had the idea of looking at the face behind the waiter's mask. He used his psionic power and simply used the X-ray function. The result disappointed him. Behind the mask was an ordinary, forgettable face that couldn't leave any deep impression. It couldn't even find some features to describe it. The masked waiter suddenly stopped talking and stopped. Can you detect psionic power? Caesar thought. The waiter put down his hand and crossed his fingers in front of his abdomen. The eyes behind the mask looked at the door behind Caesar without any abnormality. It seems that your entourage has come. Caesar looked back as he was told. More than 10 soldiers in neat armor rushed in and knelt down on one knee in front of him. The leader was the captain of the guards who had stopped him before. My lord. Caesar had a good impression of this guy and put down the wine glass in his hand. What's wrong? Lord Long, Governor Margosos was very happy when he heard the news of your arrival in Galanaud. He immediately began to prepare a banquet and specially sent me to invite you. The captain of the guards paused and said, My lord, please forgive my previous offense. It was a misunderstanding. We didn't know. Then let's go. Caesar interrupted him. If he didn't play cards, there was no need to stay in the tavern. There was nothing wrong with meeting the governor of Galanaud. As he stepped out of the tavern, Caesar looked back and found that the waiter was still standing there with his fingers crossed in front of his abdomen in a respectful posture. The mask remained unchanged, and the face behind the mask remained unchanged. Chapter 577. As the governor, Magoso's mansion was located beside a lake. 7 tall towers rose from the ground, and the tall brick walls were covered with green vines. The soldiers stopped at the entrance and were stopped by the guards. The captain of the guards shouted at the Dragonborn guards in unfamiliar draconic language, and the Dragonborn guards responded in the same tone. They then waved their claws, indicating that they could enter. In order to welcome you, many people with power will attend the banquet tomorrow. These people are the pillars of Galanaud. The governor naturally has to protect the guests, especially you. The captain of the guards walked beside Caesar and led the way. So the patrols here are much stricter. Inside the mansion, the air was filled with the fragrance of fire pepper, lemon, and cinnamon. Caesar was escorted into the guest hall. The surrounding stained glass depicted the rise of the empire, and the oil and the black candlesticks on the walls burned continuously. Under the archway, with carved stone lions, a maid announced his arrival with a gentle and sweet voice. "Your guest has arrived, Governor." Caesar walked past the maid into the courtyard with stone pillars and green vines everywhere. The shadows of the leaves were dyed a bone-like silver by the moonlight. Margosos was sitting at the stone table in the courtyard, with fragrant honey roast duck and pepper oranges in front of him. While Caesar was sizing him up, he was also sizing him up. The guy in front of him was a head taller than the tallest dragonborn Margosos had ever seen. He was also very strong, but his movements were agile and light. There was almost no sound when he moved. His body was as graceful as a night leopard on the hunt. His black skin was wrapped in an armor-like stratum corneum, and there were sharp horns on the back of his head. This guy was not weak. Margosos did not see any uneasiness or panic after seeing him. Since he dared to come so openly, the possibility of him faking his identity should be very small. "Welcome," Margosos greeted while tearing off a roast duck wing and putting it in his mouth. His beard was stained with honey and oil. Although he had completely transformed into a human, this guy was still a dragon, and he still maintained the habits of dragons. "It's too late today. Let's eat something first, and I'll have a banquet for you tomorrow. What do you like to eat?" "Rotten fish. I've asked the kitchen to prepare it in advance. It will be sent over soon." "Don't." Caesar sat down. Marcoso's casual and friendly attitude left him with a good impression. Compared to the masked waiter, this well-built man who was dressed luxuriously and ate meat without a care for etiquette was much more adorable. However, Caesar really did not want to eat rotten fish. The rotten, sour fish with maggots crawling on its surface was hard to swallow just by looking at it. However, if he really ate it, the taste was unexpectedly good. Caesar still remembered it. "Just eat human food," Caesar said. "All right." Marcosos snapped his fingers and turned his head to the side as he shouted, "Get some food first. Also, make 20 portions of roast duck, kill 5 cows, and bring a few barrels of wine." Plates of food were placed in front of him. There was fragrant roast meat, black sausages dripping with oil, hot and crispy blood pies, all kinds of fruits, beet soup, and exquisite gallinade cake. I heard from humans that if you have a misunderstanding with someone that is difficult to resolve, you should treat them to wine. Finish the wine, and the misunderstanding will be cleared up. Marcosos pushed the wine and meat in front of Caesar. "What misunderstanding?" Caesar took a sip of wine. Marcosos glanced at him and said, "I haven't finished yet. The important part is the second half of the sentence. The humans also said that if you want to be friends with a stranger, you should treat them to wine. Finish the wine, and you will be familiar with them." Caesar began to gnaw on the roast meat in front of him. Although he could live well without food with his physique, food was one of the few hobbies in his dragon life. The feeling of not stuffing food into his mouth for 50 years was not something that could be described with words. After hearing Marcoso's words, Caesar, who was focused on the food, casually said, "Aren't you the governor of Gallinade? Why are you so obedient to humans?" The blue dragon on the other side was shocked, realizing that the test had come. As expected, there was no way to escape this. As an emissary sent by the royal court, he would definitely check his situation after seeing him. "It's precisely because I'm the governor that I have to listen to humans." Marcosos pretended not to care and laughed. "When I was a feudal lord, I did whatever I wanted. If any of my kin dared to disobey, I would throw them into the pot and cook them. If I didn't like the look of them, I would electrocute them. But times have changed now. As a governor, I have to prioritize the interests of the empire and do a good job in Gallinade. I'm not good at such things, so I can only think and listen to those smart humans." Caesar thought to himself, "Why does this sound so weird? It's like handing over the answers to a test. This feeling was exactly the same as when he sat on the throne and listened to the reports of his subordinates. Could it be that this guy has discovered my true identity? That can't be. Caesar stared at Marcosos. This blue dragon had just entered legendary. It was impossible for him to have the ability to see through his disguise. This scrutinizing gaze. There's no doubt about it. This guy is the emissary sent by the royal court. Marcosos became more and more certain. It must be hard to manage Galanaud, right? Caesar asked politely as he continued stuffing meat into his mouth. It's not hard to serve the empire. That's what we blue dragons do. Marcosos began to express his loyalty. I'm indebted to Emperor Caesar for his trust in me. Now that the emperor has fallen into a deep slumber, we have to help him protect the Dragon Empire. Nothing must go wrong. He smacked his lips and continued. If you have time, you can mention to His Highness Odin that Galanaud welcomes His Highness and the Queen to visit. After all, this is the city that His Highness built for them. The people respect them. Caesar understood why this guy would say such strange things. Previously, in order to scare the guard, he deliberately said that he was serving His Highness Odin. After that, this sentence reached Marcosos' ears, and this guy believed it. So gullible? Caesar was a little annoyed. Just because of a casual sentence, without verifying his identity with the royal court, Marcosos believed his words. Didn't that mean that any random person could easily fool this guy? Who knew how many stupid things this blue dragon had done while it was in office? However, this was not really Marcosos' fault. It was Caesar himself who had fallen into a misunderstanding. After all, the governor of Galanaud was a genuine legendary blue dragon. If he really revealed his complete form, he could scare ordinary people to death. Apart from Caesar, who would dare to lie in front of this blue dragon, pretend to be an emissary of the royal court, and calmly accept the invitation to sit down and eat meat? Most importantly, the information Caesar revealed was not complete enough. Marcosos could not pry into his true strength and could only get the general information of a legendary, together with his appearance as a descendant of the Black King. Every detail made Marcosos even more certain that he was a powerful person sent by the royal court. There was no need to verify it at all. Fine, Caesar mumbled. Although he was dissatisfied, he did not immediately flare up. He simply remembered Marcosos' name in his heart, ready to deal with him when he returned. According to the local laws of Galanaud, what punishment will the two thieves face? Chapter 578. Marcosos searched his mind for a while and realized that he really didn't know how to deal with such a small crime. As the governor, he usually didn't pay attention to such trivial matters. God knows why the emissaries sent by the higher-ups kept thinking about it. Thus, the blue dragon laughed awkwardly and said, Galanaud is also a part of the empire. How can there be special local laws? Everything is according to the laws issued by the court. As for the specifics of this matter, I'll have to ask the prison. Caesar focused on stuffing meat into his mouth and chewing. After the blue dragon finished speaking, he casually responded. In his heart, Marcosos was already a useless dragon. When he returned to the court, he would let Hog arrange for him to go to the new world to mine. Now it seemed that except for a few special cases, most of the Penishade evil dragons were the same. Even the blue and green dragons were not suitable for public office. This matter should be left to the races that were good at it, such as the humans and elves. As for dragons, they were more pleasing to the eye on the battlefield. Marcosos paused for a moment and realized that the messenger did not continue. He was afraid that the messenger would be dissatisfied with his vague answer. So he quickly called in the soldiers who were waiting outside the hall. Captain, you tell me what will happen to the two fellows who were thrown into the dungeon today. My lord. The soldier knelt in front of the stone table with a nervous expression. He hesitated for a while before saying, I just received news that the two of them are gone. Marcosos was stunned. Gone? What do you mean? It means gone. The soldier really didn't know how to explain. He heard that Caesar was a messenger sent by the court, so he could only close his eyes and say, You know. Marcosos was so anxious that even his beard had a few streaks of lightning. He was afraid that the person beside him would misunderstand, so he didn't even dare to look at the other party's eyes. He stood up from his seat and said, "Idiot, speak clearly. Don't talk nonsense in front of the messenger of the court. One more word, and I'll roast you and eat you right now." The guard captain felt a chill in his heart. It seemed that Margosos had made up his mind to feign ignorance and was prepared to punish his subordinates. However, there was nothing he could do about it. After all, Margosos was the governor of Galanaud. He couldn't take responsibility for this matter. "They're undead." The captain steeled himself and decided to shoulder the responsibility. Sorting out the information in his head, he steeled himself and said everything in a single breath. "Thanks to His Highness Odin's divine might, the production of undead creatures in Galanaud and across the Empire is rapidly decreasing. To maintain their normal operations, they've begun to actively convert other creatures into undead creatures. The reason why you tried so hard to stop me from killing those two thieves was because you wanted to give them to the undead." Caesar stopped eating and put down the meat in his mouth. No. The guard captain hurriedly explained. "Those two thieves will really be interrogated in the dungeon and judged according to the laws of the Empire of Law. Although the undead often visit the dungeon to convert prisoners, they usually only convert prisoners who have committed heinous crimes and are sentenced to death. But this time, that's too much." Margosos was furious. As the governor, he naturally knew about this matter. In order to provide sufficient soul sources for the Lich Lord, the undead had to search for more people to convert. After making a request, Margosos was also willing to help them. He reached an agreement with the local undead leader, allowing the undead to convert those felons and death row prisoners who were thrown into the lowest level of the dungeon in advance. These shady dealings were not known to His Highness Odin, but everyone was well aware that the other cities in the Empire were doing the same. Who would have thought that the other party would cross the line this time? And coincidentally, when the court's emissary was investigating, if this matter was reported to the court, his head would be placed in front of His Highness Odin in less than a day. With that thought in mind, the blue dragon stomped his foot in rage, and thunder rumbled through the ground. "Come out." The response was quick. In the next second, black smoke and steam formed on the ground. The smoke gathered and churned in the courtyard, condensing into a distorted human figure. Its white eyes flashed. "Calling me at this time? Aren't you afraid that I'll disturb your mood of having a meal?" Governor, unable to suppress his anger, Margosos' body showed the characteristics of a dragon. His clothes were torn apart, and two huge wings appeared on his back. His body expanded a few times, and the muscles on his arms bulged. His fingernails also became thin and long. Margosos took 2 steps forward and grabbed the undead walker that appeared. "Lich Lord, are you preparing to betray His Highness Odin? How dare you cross the line? How is that possible? No matter if it's me, the City Lord, or Lord Leon, all the undead are loyal to Odin." The undead walker was not angry at all and did not struggle. "What made you have such a misunderstanding?" Margosos was too lazy to talk to it and directly asked, "What's going on in the dungeon? You converted 2 prisoners today, and they haven't been sentenced to death." "Impossible," the undead walker denied. "Lord Iraq has reached an agreement with you. Other than the lowest level of the dungeon, we will not visit any other place and will not convert any prisoners who are not on death row. Can you guarantee that? You didn't do it, but can you be sure that the other undead didn't do it either?" Margosos stared at it, and 2 streams of white smoke came out of his nostrils. "Governor, we undead have rules and regulations now. Without special permission, we can't easily convert living people. As far as I know, no undead got special permission from the City Lord today," the undead walker explained patiently. "If you don't believe me, I can only ask the City Lord to come up here." Margosos frowned deeply. After working together for so many years, he believed that the undead would not lie in a face-to-face situation. However, the soldiers under him said with certainty that the people had indeed disappeared in the dungeon, just like how the undead dragged away prisoners on death row in the past. "Maybe your soldiers lost the people themselves. The shadow in the blue dragon's hand shifted its gaze and looked at the guard captain kneeling at the side. Why did you try to avoid your punishment? That's why you pushed the blame to us undead. My lord, I swear to you on my honor and life. Every word I said was not false. The guard captain did not move, only lowering his head and saying sullenly. Margosos looked at Caesar, asking for his opinion. Go to the dungeon and investigate. Caesar raised his chin. In his opinion, the blue dragon's actions were fake. He wanted to see how this fellow would end up. There were 4 dungeons in Galanout. In this vast land, criminals were arrested every day for theft, robbery, and kidnapping. No matter what era it was, such outlaws were always endless. Even Caesar could not think of a better solution to this problem other than to develop the productivity. Other than Caesar, there were also the guard captain, the undead walker, the warden, and 2 prison guards who followed Margosos into the dungeon. The walls of the dungeon were all hard granite, and some places were even equipped with steel plates and magic shackles. The further down they went, the narrower the passage became, and the number of cells gradually decreased. This place had a total of 5 floors, and they had only reached the first floor. This was the place where ordinary criminals were detained. Most of the cases were simple, and they would face trial after a few days. They would be imprisoned, serve hard labor, or be released after paying a fine. The 2 thieves who were thrown in this afternoon were also locked up on this floor. The prison guard lit a torch on the wall, and the darkness dispersed. Caesar saw that there were many prisoners in each room of the dungeon. When they saw someone come in, these people all cried and moaned. Most of them shouted that they were wronged and begged for mercy, but a small number of them cursed viciously and viciously. There were also some who hid in the corner and turned a blind eye, not saying a word. Be honest. Do you all want to be whipped? The prison guard led them to a door with an iron window. There were still chains hanging on the door. My lord, the 2 who were sent in this afternoon are locked up here. Open the door, Magwosis said. The prison guard unlocked the door with a key and opened it. A turbid and stinky air instantly entered their nostrils. The walls of the cell were bare and dripping with water. There were some straws in the corner that were used as beds for prisoners, and there was a small oil lamp hanging on the wall. If the lamp was lit, it meant that there were prisoners in this cell. But now, there was nothing here. The necromancer was the first to examine the cell. It circled around and sniffed and concluded, See, I told you it had nothing to do with us. There is no trace of negative energy in this place, not even a little bit. Indeed, there is none. Magwosis nodded. Maybe it was done by a high-grade undead. The guard captain interrupted. Are you stupid, soldier? The necromancer looked at him with disdain. The higher the grade of the undead, the stronger the negative energy left behind. Unless you become an extraordinary undead like my lord, there is no way to hide these things. There is also no trace of magic. Magwosis looked at the prison guard. Who else came to this cell today? Were you all broken out? You must be joking, my lord. Who would dare to break out here? The prison guard said respectfully. Those 2 fellows just came in this afternoon. No one has contacted them yet. Then what is going on? Magwosis had a headache. 2 people just disappeared for no reason. If it was any other time, he would punish everyone in the dungeon and have them investigate with all their might. Then the matter would be over. But this time, the messenger of the royal court was right beside him. He had to find a way to get to the bottom of this. The blue dragon felt a headache, but Caesar did not feel it at all. In his eyes, the surrounding space was different from other places. There were traces of brittleness and imperceptible fluctuations. It was obvious that someone had violently torn it apart. Someone had used this method to take away the prisoners who had once stayed here. Traveling through space was beyond the knowledge of ordinary creatures. Even Caesar had to be serious when he wanted to track it. A legendary dragon like Magwosis could not even sense that something was wrong. What was the reason for someone with such means to be willing to save 2 ordinary prisoners? Chapter 579. Stand still. After discovering this problem, Caesar was no longer in the mood to play with Margosos and the rest. Ripples appeared, and vibrations came from the bottom of their feet as if an earthquake was coming. Caesar raised his hand and cut a hole in space. The entire room was filled with an energy storm. Before Margosos and the rest could even scream, they suddenly lost their footing. A light cut through space, and a void crack appeared for a short while. At the same time, it created a strong suction force. What followed was countless silhouettes of time and overlapping world bubbles. Roar! Margosos instantly transformed into a huge blue dragon that struggled in the turbulence, roaring to hide his uneasiness. He was simply stunned. The messenger of the royal court had easily torn apart space without making a sound. That was something that only the most powerful legendary, or even extraordinary, could do. If a messenger was unhappy with him, wouldn't his head be sent to His Highness Odin within a day? It was chaos in front of Margosos' eyes. He fell, spun, and tumbled rapidly. While trying to maintain his consciousness, he resisted the gravitational pull from the world bubbles. But in the end, he landed on the ground. It was a smooth landing, and there was even a hint of carefreeness and satisfaction. After all, Caesar did not intend to let these guys fall to their deaths. This is dimensional travel. Margosos looked around and could not believe his eyes. As a legendary dragon, Margosos was confident that he had some knowledge. He knew that he had just been pulled into a void crack and was forced to undergo a dimensional transfer. Although he did not know where the messenger of the royal court was going to take them, it would not be strange to see what happened next. Even if they were teleported to hell, or even the abyss, it would still be within the scope of understanding. However, the scene in front of him was simply inconceivable to Margosos. In front of him was a spherical space with a diameter of almost 100 meters. It seemed to be underground and was divided into several levels. In the middle level was a huge metal ball. Many expressionless humans surrounded the ball, looking expressionlessly at the flow of information on the magic crystal screen. There were also many mechanical structures of unknown principles moving around. The whole space was clean and bright, but there was a sense of absurdity that far exceeded the current era. Not to mention Margosos, even Caesar was a little surprised. Ayaya, I only left a small trace, and they actually came looking for me. A figure emerged from the second half of the spherical space. His voice came from afar. I didn't expect it to be an acquaintance. The person was wearing a strange mask. The mask was divided into black and white by a vertical line in the middle. The left side of the mask was grinning, while the right side had its eyes closed and was crying. He crossed his fingers in front of his abdomen and walked forward slowly, not caring about the huge and awe-inspiring legendary blue dragon. The first time I met you, I knew that you were a prominent figure. It seems that is indeed the case. He smiled to himself, but his face remained unchanged behind the mask. He opened his arms and made a gesture of embracing. Welcome to the Galanout Arcana Computation Center. How about it, my guests? Are you interested in visiting? Are you the one who took my prisoner away? Margosos' voice was like thunder. The legendary blue dragon that was more than 30 meters long lowered its head. Tiny electric currents flashed in the air, and its strong and protruding jaw approached the person. Are you talking about these two fellows? The masked man snapped his fingers, and a metal door in the spherical space opened as if it had received an order. In the depths of the room, there was a huge culture tank filled with white liquid. On the transparent glass, there were more than a dozen blurred human figures. The prisoners who had disappeared before were among them. They are the modified bodies that I went through a lot of trouble to find, and they were saved by you for no reason. However, it is a bad habit to give up halfway. I always finish what I started. This is not a technology that should appear in this era. Caesar frowned and observed everything in the spherical space. He was the only one who could understand what was in this place. Computers, synthetic modules, mechanical production lines. They were all things that only a technological civilization could have. You can understand it? The masked man was surprised. His face behind the mask also changed slightly. What a surprise. As it happens, I haven't found a manager of this material plane yet, so asked you to, at this moment, Margosos, who felt offended, suddenly roared and interrupted the masked man. He began to prepare his breath. Insignificant reptile, what have you done in my territory? The masked man clicked his tongue unhappily and disappeared. In the next second, he appeared on top of Magoso's head. He pointed his finger at the dragon's head, and the huge and strong legendary blue dragon fell to the ground. Many of its bones were broken. You have a nerve to call someone else a reptile? Hey, don't cross the line, Caesar said. Although he was not satisfied with Margosos, the blue dragon was helping the Imperium maintain the rule of Galanout after all. Caesar could not just watch his kin being beaten up. The masked man turned around and looked at him with a smiling eye. What? Do you want to try it too? Boom. It was the same move, but this time the masked man was the victim. Caesar's body disappeared, and the enlarged arm grabbed the masked man's head and slammed him into the ground. The floor that did not crack even when Margoso's bones were smashed into pieces. There were not many things in this world that could withstand Caesar's tremendous strength. The masked man's head also burst into a cloud of blood, with all kinds of brain and bone fragments splattering everywhere. Well, I know who you are. The masked man, who was lying on the ground with his head shattered and half of his body missing, made a sound. The mask seemed to have some kind of strange magic. It was still intact. Under the effect of the mask, the blood and brain matter that splattered everywhere were all sucked back into the masked man's body, and the head was reformed. This guy, who could no longer be called a human, supported himself with his hands and stood up shakily. I was wondering why I couldn't detect the strength. I didn't expect you to come in person, Caesar. As he spoke, he turned around and opened his hands to the huge metal ball. But even you can't stop all this now. The data has been uploaded, and it won't be long before my power will descend on this world. When that time comes, everything will shiver in the cold wind of winter. Another one. Caesar shook his head and sighed. He had seen a lot of such guys some time ago. Tell me, where did you come from, God? Or abomination? It really annoys me. I didn't expect that until now. You still don't know my name. God? Abomination? Ha ha, that's ridiculous. The other party let out a strange chuckle. The facial features on the mask moved quickly, making an evil smile. Then, the mask returned to its original chaotic appearance. However, since you asked so sincerely, I will be merciful and tell you that I am Mad Clamor, that you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.